Here.
Member Demmett,
Here.
Member Patton,
Here.
Member Plosky,
Here.
Member Fisher is here, Vice President Exum,
Here.
and President Hall.
Here. Okay, all are present. So now I need to ask, do we have any additions, corrections, or modifications for tonight's agenda? Nope, none. We'll move on to citizen statements, and we're going to do things tonight. We have some in-person statements in addition to some emailed ones. And we're going to try out using a timer system tonight because we have such a large volume of statements. We're going to have a timer appear on the screen to time out the 5 minutes, and people will be allowed to speak. I will be reading within that time frame, and after the 5 minutes is up, we'll be muted. So anybody giving a citizen statement, please keep that in mind as they read, and I will try to read fast to make sure I get through everything. So we're just waiting on our first in-person citizen statement coming from Julie Blixen. Hold on, folks, just getting through some technical stuff.
And now you should be
I
able
don't
to
think
speak.
so.
Go ahead, Julie.
Okay, you good? Can everyone hear me now? Yes. Like the old Verizon commercial, right? Can you hear me now? You're on mute. Good evening, President Hall and members of the board and members of Central Office. As you know, my name is Julie Blixen. I am the Assistant Principal for Student Engagement at Urbana High School. I've been in that position for a year now and have learned so much about what a wonderful district this that we have here in Urbana, and so excited to be working here and working with these wonderful students and families. I have two statements to read tonight. One is from Eric Morrow, who couldn't be here, but he is one of our student interventionists and has been for over 10 years at Urbana High School. So I'll read his first. To the USD school board members, USD administrators, and those who are in attendance via technology or possibly in person, good evening. My name is Eric Morrow, and I want to thank you for this opportunity. I'm starting my 10th year at Urbana High School. Combining that time with my previous years, I have had just under 25 years of experience working in education. The purpose of this statement is to advocate for the continuance of the school resource officers who work at the Urbana School District's high school and middle school. I find that both officers Chad Burnett and Michelle Robinson are an asset to the district. During my supervisions at various extracurricular activities, I have witnessed both of them interacting with students in an encouraging manner, not authoritative. During different times when I've gone over to the middle school, Officer Michelle Robinson is gracious and supportive. When dealing with situations at the high school, Officer Chad Burnett has been a valuable collaborator regarding opinions that advocate for the student. He keeps us abreast of community situations that could flow over into the school. We find out about certain situations that allow us to avoid conflicts at Urbana High School. I believe that he does not have a punitive philosophy because I have not witnessed him working with him. He displays a proactive approach to stay off situations prior to something arising. I believe that this is a direct result of him having a degree in education prior to getting into law enforcement. During this unfortunate time of COVID-19, Officer Burnett has gone above and beyond his duties at the high school. He has participated in organizing and handing out materials at the start of the year, and he has helped deliver materials to homes as well. I close by saying Officer Chad Burnett's overall approach to his position as a school resource officer is what I would want to continue and see as an asset within our school community. Thank you for your time and consideration. Again, that was Eric Morrow, student interventionist. This next letter is from myself, Travis Corson, Dr. Janice Nolan, Steve Waller, and it is supported by Christopher Luffman, Lawrence Reed, and Stephanie Hammond. We all collaborated on this at times. So again, good evening, and I'm just looking at the timer. Okay. There are many reasons why having an SRO is important in both high school and middle school, the least of which is about having a police presence in the building. From preschool through elementary, we teach our students that police officers, firefighters, ambulance drivers, etc., are helpers. We teach them that they are people to go to when they are lost or have a problem. Oftentimes, elementary teachers ask officers to come in and talk to their classes about various things like bike safety, stranger danger, what to do in emergencies, and even to help find the missing gingerbread man. Suddenly, when students get to middle school, the police are now there for a different reason. In actuality, no. They're still there to be the helpers. They're still there when students need something. SROs are at the very root of what community policing looks like. Students are able to see that the police are there when they need something, not there to arrest kids. SROs are able to connect students to resources that they may be in need of, or help with transportation, or even go into classes and teach about policing. I can share with you at another time and email you pictures of Officer Burnett in his short time before COVID in our business law class, teaching the students about what it is to be a police officer and what they needed to do. And just the fabulous rapport he had with our students and how they were able to get some hands-on learning from a professional in that field. And I say that in the next paragraph, but the Urbana High School resource officer, Chad Burnett, epitomizes the community policing program. His intent is to connect with students, offer support and services, and work with them to keep them out of trouble. He has helped deliver food to families in need, even taking it to their houses. He greeted every senior as they came for graduation, and they were excited to see him. He is visible in the hallways and commons during lunch and makes an effort to interact in a positive way with the students. He went and spoke to the business law class, and he's also going to work with the driver's ed teachers. This has a plan to work with the driver's ed teachers on their Zoom meetings this fall to make sure that students are understanding the rules of the road and what they need for that. And had many thoughtful discussions with those students. And though he's only been with us at a short time due to COVID, the relationships he has built are impressive. There is one student who will only go to him when she is having a hard time. The way he is able to keep her calm and talk with her calms her down immensely. I have seen him respond to students rather than react. He remains calm even when students do not. He is able to listen to what they're saying and help them come to resolution. He does not take what they are saying personally and remains the utmost professional in a school setting. In multiple conversations, he has said that he wants to be in the schools because this is where the prevention happens, so students don't go into the criminal justice system. In fact, last year, a parent asked to have her student removed from the school by SRO Burnett, and because of something that had happened in their home, and he wouldn't do so because that student was where he was supposed to be and had done nothing criminal, and told the parent that I will not be taking this child out of school. He had to explain to the mom that his role was not to remove students from school. During the time of COVID, SRO Burnett's daily activities have shifted a bit, and I know that that's what now this major conversation is about, but he is still an integral part of the student engagement office at UHS. He has been working with our student interventionists, our student engagement advocates, our clinical professionals, and our social workers to ensure every student's mental and physical needs are met. Chad meets weekly with that team to identify what interventions are necessary and how they can be implemented, and participates in those interventions. With his background in education, he is cognizant of what students need and how to help them access the resources they may need. SRO Burnett's knowledge of the community and past interactions with students and families have proven to be a major contribution to our decision-making around students. Without his insight, we might not be able to best help the students. SRO Burnett has made home visits to deliver Chromebooks to students who need them. He has distributed materials to the students for their classes. He has been in the Internet Hub assisting students get into their classes and the work when they have questions. He is working with the family and consumer science teachers to be sure their students have access to the foods materials they need for cooking. And yesterday, we found a family in need of assistance with their rent. SRO Burnett reached out to the family, contacted several social service agencies, and was able to get them the assistance that they needed in a very timely manner. While the need for SROs looks different at this time, it is also imperative that we as a district maintain our commitment to the contract with the city of Urbana. Times are different with students not in the building, but we're utilizing the SROs they should be, a resource that provides community outreach and another professional who can work with students, even while we are remote. This matter was discussed at length last fall and into the winter, with a vote going with having a full-time SRO in the middle and high school. And now is not the time to change that decision. Thank you very much for your time. It was right when the timer.
Okay, we're just going to wait on our next in-person coming. Thank you.
Have a great night. Be safe.
Next up, we have Alan Romero. I'm just waiting for him to get his temperature check and come in the building. So I don't know if you, when you were outside, if you heard what I said, and we have a timer that'll be on your screen for the 5 minutes, just so you know, and I'm going to mute myself now.
So, are you ready? Can everybody hear me? Oh, I see. Okay. So, my name is Romero. I was here 2 weeks ago, I believe. And I have prepared a statement, which I will now read. We are a coalition of different groups representing parents, community members, and students that are here to say again, Black Lives Matter. So this is addressed specifically to Mr. Dimmitt. I hope you're watching. Mr. Dimmitt, do you know what they're saying about you? They're making memes, Mr. Dimmitt. They're saying that you are saying some very troubling things behind closed doors. Dr. Ivory Tatum is not your shield, Mr. Dimmitt. Black people are not all the same. I hope you understand that. We wouldn't have to be here week after week if we trusted her to tell you what's right. For example, in Chicago, community groups have been successful at asking the school board to reconsider contracts for sworn officers in schools. Bigger schools than ours. Even Champaign teachers are out there marching in the streets. So when we come down to voice our concerns, it's because we know our litter backwater is supposed to be on the cutting edge. We are just here to make sure that the resources are going where they need to go right now. There are no students in the schools and we have a deficit. Why are we paying the sworn officers in the schools over $250,000? We're at a moment of historic importance and we're urging you to do the right thing. We're a coalition of community members. You had over 1,000 people write in last week. And we're telling you how to do the right thing right now. All you have to do is reallocate those resources. So if the school board is concerned about its legacy, please do what is right tonight. And do not fund the sworn officers in the schools. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Oops. It's Ashley Salinetro, I think. Lori? Ashley, yes. Okay, up next is Ashley Salinetro. I hope I said her name correctly. Waiting on her.
Oh, shoot. Yeah, they probably are. I'll ask for that. I don't know why it took me 2 speakers. Well, it wasn't in her.
You sure? Yep, there's some in here too if you need.
It's not required, so it's not required.
Here tonight. Hi. I thought there'd be more people present. I mean, I know they're all online. But,
So if you want to just state your name, and if you want to, you can put your address too. This is the new one.
okay.
And then the timer will start on your screen.
And you'll have 5 minutes to speak. If you didn't hear what we said outside, if you were outside when we were speaking, it was 5-minute time limit. And then at that time, we'll hit the mute button, but you should be fine. Okay, go ahead.
Hi, I am Ashley Salinetro. My address is 2710 Summit Court in Urbana, 61802. And I just want to say good evening and thank you guys for giving me this opportunity to speak and provide public comment. I am probably my statement is probably unpopular opinion, but I felt as a concerned parent that I should be here tonight to make my statement. I'm a little nervous, sorry. I'm here to express my concerns and explain a situation that I'm sure other parents are also experiencing. Like most kids gearing up for kindergarten, my daughter Julia was very excited to be a part of real school. So much that a month before attending school, she was in the backseat of my car singing a happy tune that she made up of that she's so excited to go to kindergarten. What's so great about kindergarten? I don't know. I just really want to go. It was the funniest thing. Anyways, we talked about kindergarten, we laughed about it, and we talked about what it would be like. And I'm speaking really fast, aren't I? So her favorite part of the idea was meeting new friends. So Julia, like a lot of kids, thrives off of social environments, and I know we all know that, right? She learns best when she's around her peers, and she enjoyed this opportunity when she attended Next Generation Preschool the last 1.5 years. Unfortunately, when me and my husband had to explain to her that she would not be in a traditional classroom for kindergarten, she struggled with this. She couldn't understand how she was able to be with her friends at preschool, but she was not able to be with her friends at kindergarten. I thought she would be able to just shrug it off and adapt to the virtual learning, but unfortunately, that was not the case for her. You probably can't see this. You might be able to online, but you probably can't see this where you're sitting from. Julia, this was her first ever assignment for kindergarten. She's in Mrs. Murphy's class at Thomas Paine. And so this is a self-portrait of her first day. In this portrait, she drew herself with a sad face and tears. And when I found it underneath her school table, when I went into her little classroom we made at home, I asked her why she was sad. And she said that she was sad because she couldn't be with her teacher and she couldn't be with her friends and she felt alone. And I've never heard her say that. And as you can imagine, I was well, first blown away by the fact that she could express the feeling of being alone. But I was also falling apart at the same time because of this statement. So, you know, in my mind, I'm saying this day was supposed to be happy for her and memorable. And we were supposed to look back, you know, on this first assignment and have those happy memories. But unfortunately for her, that was not the case. I am fortunate enough to have an employer that allows me to work from home while Julia attends virtual learning. However, her feelings of being alone are very valid. And while she is engaging in synchronous virtual learning, and I thank you guys for that opportunity and coming up with that creative solution, she still does not get the necessary presence that I know that she needs, that I've seen her thrive off of being around other children. And after her synchronous learning is completed, she spends the remaining, unfortunately, and I hate to say this, but the remaining 5 hours of my work day in front of the TV, as I still have a job to do. So I can see how she feels alone. I'm sorry, I don't have any other children. She hasn't been around kids for 6 weeks, so I'm a little emotional. I have some information on a study. I mean, I have a limited time, but I'm going to do it of the from the American Academy of Child and Adolescent Psychiatry, Matthews et al., 2015, and the results show that primary and secondary school children who are socially isolated experience. Practice this. Experience greater mental health difficulties. And 5-year-olds who were diagnosed with ADHD had experienced heightened effects of social isolation and were more at risk of becoming socially isolated at the age of 12. We are in the process of working with Julia's pediatrician, as we suspect she may have signs of ADHD, and I fear for her future if this continues for an entire year. According to CU Public Health District in Champaign County, a total of 382,263 tests have been performed, with 3,811 confirmed cases, or just under 1%, well under the 5.5% of the state rate. And out of the total of 201,000 people in our population, that's only 1.9%. So I urge you to look at the local data and make your decision for returning to in-person learning in October, at least for the original idea of the AB schedule. This is just one story, and I'm sure many other kids are experiencing this as well, just like Julia. I want to say I respect your decision that was made to make school virtual during this first quarter, and I too am concerned with the physical health of our children. However, this leaves me with the question of where do we draw the line between the importance of physical health and mental health? Thank you. Sorry.
Thank you, Ashley.
Nate Wall. Okay. Up next, we have Nate Wall.
You just stand right here in the exit. All right, cool.
Okay, you wanna, I don't know if you heard what we said said outside.
I didn't.
Oh, you didn't hear it?
No, what'd you say?
Oh, your name, right?
Yes.
Okay, the announcement was made outside that we've got a timer system going on. the
Oh,
screen
okay.
To help you stay within the 5 minutes, and then at 5 minutes, it'll go to mute, but
Okay.
you can see it, so I'm sure you'll be fine.
All right, cool.
You can just start whenever you're ready.
All right.
State your name first, please.
Okay. Nate Wall, Urbana resident and parent of 2 high school students. It was irresponsible of the board to employ armed officers to be stationed in the learning environment of Urbana students. It will be even more irresponsible if the board continues to allow armed officers to take up space in UHS or in UMS. Students come to school to learn. If students are worried that cops will do to them the same things that they've seen done to people who look just like them, how can these students be expected to focus while they're in school? $127,000. It's ridiculous to think educated board members couldn't think of a better way to support student growth. Or is that even something that board members are concerned with? UHS needs more trauma-informed support personnel. Use the money allocated for SROs to get that done. Urbana students deserve our best. And I hope that all of you agree with that. Thank you.
Thank you.
Right.
Thank you. Next one, Ann.
Next is Ryan White.
Ryan.
Ryan.
Sorry if I'm muting and unmuting myself constantly. It's because in the room, the laptop across from me is sending back some major reverb. So sorry, Ryan, I believe Ryan White from Cottage Grove.
And Ann, I told everybody out there about the 5 minutes you don't have to go through.
Okay, great.
That's right there.
Okay, if you just want to go ahead and state your name for the camera, and you can start speaking when you're ready.
My name is Ryan White, and so the reason that I don't like the SROs and stuff in the school, for safety reasons and stuff, you never know what could happen or what, anything. And then, sorry, I gotta think. Yeah. Like I said, safety reasons, and I forgot what I wrote on the paper. I'm thinking about it. I just have a mental block right now. Sorry.
It's okay.
Yeah.
Nervous.
Yeah. Can I? You guys see all my paper? Like, can I look at it?
You have written SRO should not be in the school because of safety issues and pay.
Oh yeah. Sorry. Yeah. Just you never know what could happen. They and I heard they get a lot of pay and stuff. That could be funding for other stuff. Better stuff for school, and like better anything. Textbooks, anything you guys need to use the money on. It, you know, they don't really have to be there. I mean, but I understand why they are there. But I don't think they should, be there. Especially with like guns and stuff. But that's it. Sorry.
Okay, thank you very much, sir. Thank you.
Next,
Somebody called JD, and I don't know how to pronounce his last name.
I'll say JD, and who's the next one up?
JD and True Johnson.
Okay.
Somebody Johnson. Oh, I'm terrible with names.
And then you stay right on the X and start speaking to that screen in front of you.
State your name, please, and then start speaking.
I am JD Raymond. I feel that having SROs in our school is very unsafe. They have guns and all this police brutality going on. It's not safe for the students, for anybody in the school. It's a weapon that can be fired, kill anyone. It's not safe at all. I feel pretty uncomfortable walking around and they're just there with guns.
Okay.
Okay, thank you, sir.
Thank you. So you go to here, Julie. There's that ready where you can go on. There's a ramp to your right, and then right around the building. Nope, straight ahead.
Drew Johnson, I believe is the first name,
Yep, and then the next.
is, Hanif Ironman.
Ironman?
Yeah, Hanif.
Okay.
Wait, what was the first name? There were two names on it, and I couldn't make out the first one at all. Ironman, I believe the family is. Maybe he's just written in front of it. Hanif, yeah.
Am I good? Come on, next down.
You can.
If you could just state your name before you start.
All right, True Johnson, and I am a 10th grader at Urbana High School. And me and some of my other friends do not feel comfortable with the SROs in the school. We feel that they are there to target us, and that is unwanted and unneeded. And that's all I have.
Thank you, sir. You're right this way. Down the hall straight ahead at three doors. There's a ramp to your right, and you go out and around the building, okay? So keep going straight ahead. Yep, that gray door. You got it. Thank you.
So did you hear that, Hanif Ironman, and after that, Laura Orr?
Laura. You want to do this stuff? You want to do this stuff while you're speaking over the phone?
Oh, I just think.
The green lights, yeah, right on the floor.
If you could just say your name before you start. that'd be great.
My name's Hanif Ironman. I do not feel comfortable with police officers in my school after all that's going on this year with police shootings, and I don't want to get shot. Thank you.
Okay, thank you.
Right, Sydney, this way. And then that gray door, and we'll go out that, down the ramp, and around the building. Straight up, you got it. Okay,
And
who's
Laura
after?
Orr is next.
And then after that?
Felipe Benito.
I might not, but that's okay, it's up to you.
Hello. You can
Hello.
just say your name to the camera, and then you'll have 5 minutes.
Sure. Hello, am I starting?
Yep, go right ahead.
All right. Laura Orr, longtime community member, parent of students in the district, former student in the district. So some of you may recall back in December when I spoke asking the board to consider my advice, not as an adversary, but as your best friend, trying to shed needed light on a bad decision that you proceeded to make. I have since come back several times with many others in hopes that you would hear the voices of the people telling you from their life experiences about the ways your wielding of power has hurt them, their children, their neighbors, and their friends. Sadly, I kind of can't believe I'm here again, 10 months later, asking for the same request. It's exhausting to continue to confront you on your poor decision-making skills and your abuse of power. And this is coming from one of your constituents that statistically is minimally impacted. Can you imagine how heavy your choices weigh on the shoulders of those most harmed by you? I should pause here and give a shout out to Ann Hall and Peggy Patton for trying to push the board to make a better decision regarding our SROs. But honestly, it should not be this hard for you all to do the right thing for your Black and brown students and families that you serve. There is no justification in the massive amounts of money you want to spend and the misguided needs of the district you spout to falsely project a narrative born out of assimilation and rooted in racism. You all exhaust me, and you have broken hearts and minds here. I ask you to be better. Please remove armed police officers from our schools. Thank you.
So after Felipe Mensto is Joey Mel. Okay.
Yeah, she didn't use the SNR.
Hi, Ann.
Hi. If you just go ahead and state your name for the camera, and then you've got your 5 minutes.
And where's the camera? The camera is here?
Yeah, right on.
Okay. Hi, my name is Felipe Menanto. Dear Urbana Board of Education members, I would like to start my comment thanking Ann Hall and Peggy Patton for start asking for the removals of armed police from the Urbana schools. This does not only make sense financially, but it is also the right thing to do. When we have, as just one example, so many immigrant kids in our districts marginalized from remote learning because of the lack of access to technology and the internet, I think it is immoral to spend $327,000 on cops to police empty buildings. However, excuse me. However, I think that data, facts, and research are no longer useful to convince this board that armed police in Urbana is a bad idea. It is heartbreaking to hear a plethora of microaggressions and false narratives from board members that only Ann Hall had the courage to correct and point out. Many of us feel that in Urbana, such conduct should not be normalized or accepted. So I'll use the rest of my 3.5 minutes to expose this problematic behavior for the benefit of all of you watching from home. First, so while Ann Hall, who is the president, wants to cancel the contracts with the city, members Dimit and Poloski express a completely false fear that the city will sue the school board if they cancel the contract. Now that the city last night passed a resolution clearly stating that it will not sue, they cannot hide behind the city anymore. They're gonna need to find some other place to hide. Dimit and Poloski think that it's more important to fulfill the contract and stick to their word and their honor with the city than doing what is morally right. I wonder how they can sleep at night. Dimit is trying to discredit one of the leaders of our local racial movement, Amina Payne, only because she's pursuing postgraduate education overseas. You're all forgetting that she still votes in Urbana. Dimit claims that people opposing armed police in schools do not represent the community. I have to tell you, you might not like how I look, but I do represent this community too. The movement has strong voices representing Urbana High School students, staff, parents, and community members, many of them who are Black and brown. These microaggressions actually mean that what he's missing is the voice of the white parents that support his outdated ideologies. Dimit also resurrected the problematic narrative of white flight
by claiming we're making our schools less attractive to white families. This inherently puts more value on certain families and pushes a false narrative that our Black and brown families' contributions to the school district is less important. Although we're tired, we're sad, and we're really frustrated by the state of our union, we're not going away. Actually, we're much younger than most of you, and we have kids that are gonna keep growing, and we're not moving away from our school because we don't think that our school is less desirable. What we're trying to do is use our collective voice to try to convince you to do what's right. This is how it's done in democracy. But we need to wonder, what will it take for you to stop ignoring your community? What will it take for you to do what's right? That's all, thank you.
You got Joe email, and then next up is Sarah Durant after that.
Thank you.
So you're gonna go on like your next show?
Hi, Joe, nice to see you.
You too. Where do I go?
Just three next, right on the floor.
Oh, I just stand?
You can stand,
Yeah.
yeah.
Okay. Let me pull up my,
Your camera's on the left, is there on the?
I see it.
You can
Okay.
do the stick
You got your notes, that's fine.
I'll pull up my statement.
And if you just state your name before you get started, and there's a timer going, so, start that when you're ready.
Okay. All right. Okay, I'll get started. So my name is Joe Wiemeltz. I am principal of Urbana Middle School, and I'm also a resident of Urbana. Have three children in Urbana schools, one at UMS with me. And so I'm here tonight speaking this evening because I've been requested to give an overview of how the school resource officer at Urbana Middle School, Officer Robinson, I'm gonna take my glasses off because they're foggy. Officer Robinson has been working during remote learning. As I understand, this has been a question of the board, particularly as it relates to the budget and the implementation of the budget during remote learning in the SRO. So if time allows, I'll also share my perspective as principal at UMS and as an individual, and important considerations to make as they relate to the SROs and next steps in Urbana schools. So the following outlines the duties and responsibilities over the past 4 weeks of our SRO, school resource officer at Urbana Middle School. So during the first quarter, Officer Michelle Robinson has supported families and staff with home visits, assisting families with getting services to them and or troubleshooting what they need for remote learning and just the day-to-day experience right now with remote learning. She's provided check-in support with students and families. In particular, one student that we've been wrapping services around has been making sure that he's been doing okay, communicating with the student's case manager, communicating with the family, providing as much support as possible, and connecting them to outside resources along with our social worker and counselor and special education case manager. She has also supported our office staff every day, working right outside the office, monitoring the front door, helping with safety in terms of protocols of entering the building right now due to COVID-19. Is also participating in our staff meetings, is staying connected to our ongoing work with our multi-tiered system of supports, our mental health committee, other social emotional learning responsibilities at our school level, supporting our attendance team, and other staff members moving forward. And lastly, staying connected to broader community organizations and the local youth assessment center and helping provide the wraparound services for families and students. And so this has been while we've been remote. So I know there's been questions about what they're doing during remote learning when students aren't in the building. So I wanted to take a moment and just give a couple highlights or descriptions of what she's been doing. In general, what the SRO has been doing over the past year related to supporting families and students, but I only have 2 minutes or so. So I'll save those and I can share those with you. I think you've already are familiar with that, but one of the things that we've seen an increase of support at UMS by having an SRO has been the connection to outside sources and resources and community agencies. And that's something that I have found to be strengthened in the past year, that connection to the Youth Assessment Center and supporting students out in the community as well as in school. And so I know that, there's been a lot of conversations around the purpose of an SRO and how they fit within the school structure, and that we should use our resources for more counselors and social workers and mental health providers. And I just wanted to say that out loud, the way in which it's connected, that she's connected to those services and supports for students. And so I think the last thing, I have a lot more, but I only have a minute and a half. I think my biggest request as a person who's a principal at Urbana Middle School, a parent of students, I know that this is a really complex issue and has been a complex issue for a long time in the past year at Urbana schools. I just really want to emphasize that regardless of the path that we take as it relates to SROs, I would really request that the board be very intentional with how you're engaging the broader community in this decision, and the district administration, myself included. We need to be very intentional with the voices that are a part of this decision-making process, as well as the voices that we haven't heard from. I think we're missing a lot of people. And, I can speak as an individual principal with a lot of privilege as a white male within this work as it relates to policing and communities of color, running a school of predominantly students of color. It's not just a simple answer and a simple a solution. I think we have to be very, very critical. What I worry is making another big policy decision without taking the time to really engage the community well, because we've seen what happens when you make big policy changes without thinking through the details of the implementation. And so I'm not here to advocate for or against a decision related to SROs. What I'm here to advocate for is a community that engages in this process really, really critically, so that we have the best decision made for Urbana schools, whether that is 2 full-time SROs or not. I think we have to be much more intentional with how we're doing it in our community. And that's my ask. I want to help with this process at the broader level, and we need to get more people involved. So thank you for your time.
Thank you, Joe.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Hmm, 8:16.
Good evening. How are you, Anne?
Good.
Good. I'm doing well. I've been wanting to contact you. I've been following you for a while, and I just have to say you've been representing us so well, and I'm very proud to call you our board member. So, but I need to write you personally because I've been meaning to write you, and I'm going to do that personally, but I feel guilty that I haven't done that yet. It's a crazy time. Sure. I'm Carrie Brown-Tess, here in Urbana. Yeah, so I want to talk about a couple different things, mostly centered around the having police in schools. We know that the council, the city council, has decided that they would not sue, or they've publicly said that they would not sue. I know that there's still conversation about some policy that we can't diminish this contract. So I'm really in concern of democracy. I just want to know, like, what specific policies still block us from going ahead and ending this contract and moving forward with this decision. I think the zeitgeist of the time is we're concerned about Black and brown bodies, and specifically because we're a school district, Black and brown bodies in our school. And I think that given this, again, the zeitgeist of the times, we understand that nationally we have a lot of very negative, disproportionate, violent treatment of Black and brown bodies nationally. So that being said, there's a request for information. Also, I'm concerned why we as citizens can't make comments on Zoom, and why it's only here that we can make comments. I'll leave it, and then if you guys want to discuss it later, or just kind of do a public, this is why. But it feels very limiting, especially because I have an autoimmune disorder myself. Putting myself with other people puts me at risk, and I've been trying to avoid that at all costs. So that would be, I think, better for our community as a whole to keep our democracy strong, but also protecting our citizenry. Okay, first point, police have not done any training. I know that we have a $2,000 item in our budget that police should be doing specific training for working with Black and brown kids, and specifically working with kids. We FOIA'd that, and we found that there's not been any training since we've initiated this contract. So I'm curious how serious we are about these police officers actually being equipped for working with children, if they haven't in this over a year done the training that we've already budgeted. There's no reason for this not to have happened. It hasn't, but there is no documented in their training logs that any of the police have done that. Any of the police working in our schools have done that. Still haven't addressed the disproportionate discipline of Black and brown students in our schools. This is we had our third-party audit almost 4 years ago. And I think that we've done the deans, get rid of the deans. Now we have police, potentially getting rid of police. We need to talk specifically about how we're going to actually create this restorative environment and not just looking at these punitive ways of treating children as if they make a mistake and it's the end, as what the Office of Dean and Office of Police Officers, that job represents. Point two, police officers, I just want to give a remember kind of time for all of us. You remember, I think it was like 4 or 5 years ago, there was a police officer in Champaign who forgot his gun on the top of his car. Do you remember this story? And he drove off, and then there was this missing gun in all of Champaign. Do you remember when that happened? These are the same people that we want in our school. Like, I feel like I don't understand why we have the gun in the school. I know we had the police officer debate, and then we had the gun debate, and I'm just shocked that in this community that we have guns in our schools now through these I think 3 police officers. We had one before, but the two new police officers. So anyway, just to remember, this is our community. This happened recently. Point 3, there was a recent lawsuit of the police with the Breonna Taylor case, and as we're seeing this again across the nation, I'm wondering how much have we budgeted for the lawsuit after this happens, after a child is shamed or publicly humiliated or what have you, whatever, or hurt or killed. How much do we have in our budget for the loss of life? Also, as we talk about increasing our voice of people in the community, there's been several recent graduates. I know Cara Monroe put her own comment on the having police in schools and her feelings on that. She graduated last year, and that's in the iPublic. There's also been students writing in, I think, Smile Politely. I think that there's been plenty of student voice saying that they did not feel comfortable, Black, brown, and white students saying this. And I think that if we're going to be serious about listening to students, Amina Payne has been a huge voice, a recent graduate. And I'm done. Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.
Okay, all right, thanks. Have a good night.
She was the last one in person. I'm just waiting to get the computer shut down. Across, that was our last person comment, but there's some reverb on the computer, so I'm going to wait for Lori to come back and get that set. Would you mind just muting that so that, thank you. Okay. Are you going back? I hope she wasn't muted, was she?
No,
I muted her.
we did hear her.
She spoke.
Good. All right. And I'm going to take my mask off because I'm by myself now. So I will continue with reading the citizen statements that we've received over email. Please bear with me. We've got a lot to get through tonight, people. Okay. First up from Robin Fellers. Hello, school board. I want to thank Ann Hall and Peggy Patton for introducing a motion to remove funding for SROs in the 2021 budget. As a parent of an Urbana student, I fully support this motion. We cannot afford to spend $327,000 on armed officers policing empty schools. And when we finally return to our buildings, we should focus on supporting our youth in more meaningful ways. Thank you. From Daniel McDonough. Board, I continue to disapprove of funds being used for SROs. It is a misuse of resources that should be used for recruitment of Black educators and social workers. Please cancel the contract. Signed, Daniel McDonough, parent of USD children. From Rebecca Powell. I am writing in support of the cancellation of the Urbana School District's SRO contract. It will cost the district $327,000 for armed officers to police empty school buildings, which is not worth it in the best of times, but especially not when the district already faces a budget shortfall of $1.5 million in 2020-2021. There's been concern expressed that the city will sue the school board if the contract was canceled, but the city has now confirmed that it will not sue. The board can no longer use the city as an excuse not to cancel the contract. Additionally, I would like funds that may have been used for SROs to be used instead for the recruitment of Black educators, bilingual counselors, trauma-informed educators, which will be much more beneficial to the development and support of our students. Thank you, Rebecca Powell. From Luke Lee. It looks like there's a few here. My name is Luke Lee, and I am a community member of Urbana-Champaign. I write to you to demand that all of you implement these anti-racist policies for our school district. Black people and other people of color in our communities deserve better from us. The actions we demand are as follows. Discipline disparities, suspension data only reaffirms stories that we're hearing about how the classroom has become a carceral space for Black students. 54% of total suspensions were Black students, 52% of out-of-school suspensions were Black students. USD 116 is 37% Black and 31% white. This further illustrates that Black students are being suspended at higher rates than their white peers. Young Black kids are disproportionately disciplined and pulled out of school for vague disciplinary infractions such as defiance and disorderly conduct and bullying. Education can only fulfill its potential as the great equalizer, a force that can overcome differences in privilege and background, when we work to ensure that students are in school every day and receive the support they need to learn and thrive. Okay, I think that's it for him. And also, if it's possible to use the timer, if you want to, these are really short ones, but soon there are going to be some longer ones. And I don't know if, I mean, I'm easily going to get through 5 minutes. I don't know what the discretion is on that, but just giving everybody a heads up. Next up, my name is Jacqueline Hanna. I am a parent and a resident of Urbana. The City Council of Urbana is voting shortly to allow our district to cancel their contract for police in our schools. The board has stated in earlier meetings that this was the fear, that if they voted to terminate the contract with the city for police in our schools, that the city would sue. Taking that statement at face value, though, I think we all know that was disingenuous on the part of more than one board member. That issue is soon to be off the table. The Urbana City Council is opening the way to terminate this contract without fear of legal reprisal. This is not an excuse. Our district is facing a $1.5 million shortfall for this school year. Our district continues to have a documented track record of racist disparity in discipline and educational opportunities for Black students. There is no excuse, financially or morally, to continue this contract with the city, and the citizens of the city will not let up or stand down. Do what is right now. Vote to terminate this contract and put those funds into attracting more Black educators, more trauma-informed educators, and into bilingual counselors immediately. Okay, next up from John Hayes. Dear Board, I am writing in to ask that SROs be removed from our schools. First, it is dismaying to see the dearth of research that demonstrates positive effects of SROs. And on the other hand, the amount of research that speaks to the negative realities of putting kids in our schools. Prison populations are disproportionately Black and brown. Suspension of students in Urbana is also disproportionate. 54% of total suspensions were Black, 52% of out-of-school suspensions were Black. USD 116 is 37% Black and 31% white. Of course, the solution to this isn't to equalize all suspensions. Rather, I vehemently oppose the intrusion of retributive justice in the school system. It baffles me that the idea of suspending a student, punishing them, will contribute to an education or even fix unwanted behavior. Again, thinking about prisons or correctional facilities, we must notice that recidivism is so high that we can't really pretend that punishment models are going to be effective for children when they don't work for adults. Approximately $320,000. This kind of money could be spent in so many ways to the betterment of the school system. Two areas in particular that come to mind are in the form of mental health counselors and arts programs. I imagine about 5 to 6 counselors could be hired for that amount of money. Considering art, music, and theater, more resources are always good. The arts may be a matter of the heart, brain, and soul, but how much more appealing and fulfilling is art when we give it a fair shake? This means giving appropriate funding to what matters. A budget is a moral document as it shows the values of an institution. When I see $320,000 put toward policing inside the school, I see that the school seems to value having antagonistic entities that will continue to disproportionately target Black and brown students. The police are a culture, and the presence of SROs brings that culture into the school system. And we must understand that this culture of policing will continue to be antagonistic. Many thanks for your time reading my input. Signed, John Hayes, Champaign-Urbana resident. From Christine Janik. Dear school board members, it is abundantly clear at this point that it makes no sense to pay $327,000 for armed officers to police empty school buildings in Urbana this year. There is no excuse not to cancel the school district's SRO contract with the city of Urbana. The unfounded claim that the city of Urbana would sue the school board for canceling this contract has been proven false. Cancel the SRO contract and use the savings to fund changes that will actually help our students. Recruit Black educators, trauma-informed educators, and bilingual counselors to help students who need support. The eyes of the community are now on you more than ever. We are paying attention to how you respond to our overwhelming support for this change. I hope that you will boldly take this step toward making our schools safer and more supportive for all. Signed, Christine Janik. From Robin Fellers. Hello, school board. I want to thank Ann Hall and Peggy Patton for introducing. Did I already read this one? I did. I'm sorry, everybody. I've got such a stack. Okay. Next up, this one is the same. It's a message sent by several people, the same message. So I'm just going to read it for all three. This is from Megan Meyer, Melissa Like, and Caitlin Brooks. Good afternoon. I'm writing to ask that you cancel the contract Urbana School District has for armed police officers in schools. This practice perpetuates the prison pipeline and unnecessarily treats our students as adversaries and criminals instead of creating a school environment that is nurturing, caring, and supportive for all of our students. Use the funds saved by canceling the contract to invest in Black educators, bilingual counselors, and trauma educators. Thank you for considering. Again, this is from Megan Meyer, Melissa Like, and Caitlin Brooks. Do you have another one? Okay, all right, thanks. Okay, all right, here's the last stack here. From Abby Schranz. Hello, while finalizing the budget for school year 2020-2021, I strongly urge you to remove the contract with UPD from the budget. Considering officers have been in Urbana schools for nearly 30 years, it is long overdue for the city to find another way to support students in a safer, more meaningful manner. The presence of officers is threatening, intimidating, and oftentimes coincides with racial bias towards various students. In order to make the school environment more accepting and productive for students, I urge you to release the Urbana contract and instead invest in social workers or counselors. Considering the UPD contract costs over $300,000 and the school district's budget is facing a shortfall, this is both a logical and productive modification. In order to reflect on the needs of the community, you ought to contemplate making this change to the budget. Signed, Abby Schranz. From Alejandro Lleras Bueti. Dear school district board members, I am a fellow concerned Urbana citizen. My kids go to Urbana schools, 3 at Leal and 1 at UMS. I want to voice my opposition to the plan to hire police officers to patrol the school buildings, particularly right now when the buildings sit empty and the city faces a budget shortfall. Now that the city council has agreed to release the school district from its current, please do the common sense thing and cancel the contract. We never wanted it and now we don't need it. And there is no money to pay for it anyway. Cancel the contract. Thank you, Alejandro Lleras Bueti. From Amina Payne. Board of Education, trauma-informed practices are practices that involve recognizing, understanding, and properly responding to the effects of trauma. The term complex trauma describes both exposure to multiple traumatic events, often of an invasive interpersonal nature, and the wide-ranging long-term impact of this exposure. Whereas simple trauma refers to one traumatic event that is definable, such as an assault. As an educator, trauma-informed educational practices and approaches are something I've built into my repertoire when working with adult learners from varied cultural backgrounds. It is frankly disgusting to hear a plethora of microaggressions and false narratives from Urbana's leadership. Many of us feel that in Urbana, such conduct should not be normalized or accepted. School resource officers are not effective in improving school safety, discipline, or climate. SROs do not improve school safety or reduce school violence. There is no clear evidence that the use of school resource officers or guards in schools is effective in preventing school violence. A review of 40 years of evaluations of school policing showed no positive impact on school safety outcomes. SROs have been involved in the school system in Urbana for nearly 30 years, the same amount of time that board member Dimmitt has served, and that is a generous term, the school district. The presence of SROs leads to more expulsions and suspensions, particularly for Black students. Studies show that schools with SROs also rely more heavily on exclusionary discipline. The data show that in Urbana in 2019-2020, 70% of total suspensions were out of school suspensions. Over half of those suspended, both in school and out of school, were Black kids. These punitive discipline measures disproportionately target Black male youth, often for subjective reasons like perceived disobedience or defiance. Most arrests stemming from the school environment and suspensions were the result of peer conflicts or conflicts between students and teachers based on perceived disobedience or defiance. Furthermore, of those children arrested in the community, nearly 85% are Black kids. Police encounters trigger stress, fear, trauma, and anxiety for Black and brown youth, which harm mental health and erode educational performance. So what works? Relationship building, mental health services, restorative approaches, and social emotional development. When schools focus on social emotional development, arrests go down and student outcomes improve. A recent study of high schools found that schools that focused on enhancing social well-being and promoting hard work enhanced students' self-reported social emotional development, resulting in fewer school-based arrests and better long-run educational attainment for students from those schools. It should be glaringly obvious why this is a community-wide issue and not only isolated to the school district to solve alone. We need true leadership to make decisions that are measurable, not for the sake of stemming white flight or the perception of economic development. their families as well. Why aren't we discussing the positive lived out experiences within our very own district? Yet we are comparing SROs to police brutality. Why aren't we talking about what positive changes have stemmed as a result of having our very own SRO in the school district? 5, with workers' compensation and medical bills, I'm sure that the district has paid a significant amount and still continues to pay those bills for those teachers and support staff who were injured due to breaking up a fight but are scarred forever. Have you suggested additional support for the teachers? 6, lastly, when those same students came back to school, and mind you, have participated, knows, or are afraid to go to school every day out of fear, can those teachers, psychologists, and other supporting staff save the day? If you allow this resolution of SROs to be eliminated in the Urbana School District, then prepare yourselves for the outcome as a result. Thank you for your time. Sincerely, LaShonda. And she did write a letter. This was a previous letter that she'd written last year that I'm not going to be able to get through in a minute and a half. She's a parent of 2 UHS students, work full-time at the courthouse, hosts Martin Luther King Jr. Jetty Rhodes Neighborhood Day. Sorry, that's my time up. Sorry. Thank you. I read the initial statement though, so that's the important thing. Okay, next up, Kelly Wegang, I'm sorry if I mispronounced that. Dear School Board, the City of Urbana has released the Urbana School District from their contract for SRO. Please go ahead and cancel the contract as per President Ann Hall's proposal. Thanks and best regards, Kelly Wegang, Urbana class of 96 alum and Urbana resident. Okay, next up, Cynthia Hoyle. I want to express my support for having school resource officers at the middle and high schools. I would prefer that the officers not be armed. Having worked with these officers, I know how much the students enjoy interacting with them. I also feel strongly that developing relationships with police officers strengthens our community. I found the guns officers are required to carry a distraction and unnecessary as I've worked with them in my programming as a volunteer. Regarding the issue of armed officers being necessary to stop school shootings in the place where there have been school shootings, having an armed officer has not always been beneficial. Thank you for considering my input. Signed, Cynthia Hoyle from Urbana. Okay, this is from Elizabeth Freivogel. Dear school board members, I'm writing to respectfully and strongly suggest that you please cancel the plan to hire school resource officers for use in Urbana public schools. Not only is this the right thing to do from a social justice perspective, it will also help to solve the large budget deficit that the school district currently faces. As a parent of 2 Urbana students and wife of a teacher in the dual language program, I call on you to help us change the face of our schools so that they are more welcoming to all races and cultures. Eliminating the use of police officers carrying weapons is a big step in the right direction. We do not need to threaten our children to make them behave. There are so many better and more positive ways to connect with students. Bilingual counselors, a diversity of educators, and additional classroom aides can all help contribute to a positive environment. Isn't our money better spent in these areas among many others? I know there was concern that the City of Urbana would refuse to nullify the contract, but just last night they agreed to do so in the City Council meeting. The school board is now free to move forward in a different and more positive direction for all. Please vote to nullify the contract for school SROs. Many thanks for your time and attention. Liz Freivogel, Urbana School District parent. Okay, this is from Amari Johnson. My name is Amari and I'm a sophomore at Urbana High School. I've been in Urbana since 4th grade at King Elementary and then UMS and now UHS. I'm writing to the Urbana School District and the Urbana City so that you can hear my opinions and my voice. I feel like sometimes other people like our parents or teachers or principals speak for us, but I want to speak for myself. I live in a neighborhood where just about every face is like mine, is Black or Hispanic, and my parents have to constantly remind me and my brother how to act if stopped by a police officer, what to say if questioned by a police officer. And we watch the countless things happening around the world and it makes us all mad. One thing my parents also taught me is to always remember that there are bad people in every job out there, but that doesn't make everyone bad. Some have more power and can do more to hurt us, or on the other side to help us. It is not in our place to label a group for 1 or 2 bad apples, but to instead do what it takes to get rid of the bad apples, but keep the rest of them. I was in the car with my brother last summer when he had an accident on our way home from my practice. It was his fault and he was nervous. He did exactly what my mom told him to do and called her right away so that she could come, and he kept his hands on the steering wheel like she'd trained him to do. The white police officer that came from Urbana was super nice. He could see that my brother was very nervous and asked him if it was his first accident. He told him what would happen and why he had to get the ticket and what to do about court, and he talked to him about his first accident and told him he was young and this was going to be okay and ways to stop his foot from slipping next time. He was not at all the police officer we had been trained to be scared of, but one of the good guys. When I'm at school, I've seen the SRO. When I first got to the school and would see the car, I would say to myself, who got in trouble today? But then I found out that that was just the SRO's car. I see him in the hallway sometimes, and he's not like the cops that walk around with bulletproof vests and stuff going around questioning people. He's just like in the hallways or around the lunchroom like the other people who work at the school. I have never felt nervous around our SROs at the middle school or the high school like I would if I was stopped by a police on the streets. I think it's good that he doesn't have all of the badge and uniform and stuff on. The SRO doesn't make me feel scared, but you know what does make me scared? The kid who said he was bringing a gun to school last year. The bullets that were found in the bathroom made me scared. When I found out my brother had just walked by a kid who was found with a loaded handgun in his trunk in our parking lot, that's what makes me scared. And when I think about that kind of scared, it makes me feel safe that we have an SRO in the school. I know that some of the kids think twice about bringing a gun in the school when they see the SRO car in front of the school. And I read that it is going to cost a lot of money to have an SRO in the school. Maybe you can find a way to save money by cutting out something else we don't need at the school. I just wanted to share my opinion because I keep reading the ones that say that the black and brown kids are so scared of police, but they didn't ask me. The only ones I know that are scared at our school are the ones that are not doing what they're supposed to do, or the ones that had an experience with the police that was not good. But aren't we a school? Aren't you supposed to be educating me? Is it okay for the school to say to us brown kids that all police officers are bad? Can't you pick the good apple and show us that there are some good police? Signed, Amari. This is from Jose Navejas. Dear members of the Board of Education, my name is Jose Navejas, and I am the parent of a student at the Urbana School District. I'm writing because I'm very concerned about the plans of the Board of Education to hire armed officers in our public schools. Like many members of our community, I believe Urbana public schools must remain weapon-free spaces devoted to learning, social interaction, and camaraderie. Unfortunately, however, for many Black and brown children all over the country, public schools often symbolize and become a direct school-to-prison pipeline serving the private interest of the industrial carceral system. I feel that the board's plan to hire armed officers would not only reinforce this kind of systemic and institutional racist practice, it would also generate unnecessary anxiety in children who look like mine. In keeping with its progressive spirit, Urbana ought to focus on reverting inequality by investing in its youth, that is, its future. Rather than hiring armed officers, which would certainly intimidate, I believe, and possibly traumatize our students, Urbana public schools should recruit Black and bilingual educators and social workers. Other major cities are already doing this, and Urbana ought to follow in their steps. With the City Council having already introduced a resolution releasing the school district from the SRO contract, the board should not follow through with its plan. At a moment when the school district is facing a $1.5 million shortfall for 2020-2021, spending $327,000 to hire armed officers is not only fiscally irresponsible, it is morally wrong. Signed respectfully, Jose Angel Navejas, PhD. From Brian Dolinar. Dear Urbana Board of Education, my child, a third grader at Leal Elementary, and I have had several deep conversations since George Floyd was killed by police about racism in the United States and in our hometown of Urbana. The many days home alone during COVID have afforded us the opportunity to have our own history lesson. I told my third grader that the school district is currently debating having police in the schools. Why do they have cops when there is no school? He said. They won't be doing anything but sitting around drinking coffee. Even a third grader gets it. So much has changed in the last few months. COVID and a resurgence of the Black Lives Matter movement. For moral reasons, the board should reconsider whether police in schools promotes a safe educational environment for Black youth. Basic common understanding, even a third grader can understand, says that the board should try to recoup some of the $320,000 being paid out to pay for police for patrolling empty school buildings. This money could be better spent on teachers who are working overtime to teach during COVID. The city budget should not be balanced on the backs of our youth. Thank you for your commitment to educating all of our youth. Signed, Brian Dolinar. From Naomi Paik. Dear members of the board, I write to you to ask that you cancel the contract between the school board and the police department to have SROs in Urbana Public Schools. The school district faces a massive budget shortfall of $1.5 million. It makes no sense to spend more than $300,000 on SROs in general, and particularly at this time when school buildings are empty due to the COVID crisis. These resources are better spent on hiring Black educators, as well as more counselors and healthcare providers like school nurses. It makes sense to provide resources to support our young people rather than socially control them. Furthermore, the board has no reason to fear that the city will sue it for rescinding its contract for SROs, as the city council voted to release the board from the SRO contract. Thank you for your consideration in prioritizing the holistic health and well-being of our young people. Signed, Naomi Paik. From Sarah Hogue. Dear USD Board of Education, my name is Sarah Hogue and I'm an Urbana resident living in Subdistrict 7. I work a lot with youth from Urbana Middle School and Urbana High School through informal teaching settings. I've also done workshops at the local juvenile detention center where I've interacted with past UMS and UHS students. I'm writing to you all tonight because I care deeply for the youth I interact with that are students in your district. My comment tonight mainly relates to the school resource officers you're currently preparing to spend $327,000 of taxpayer dollars and educational funds on. Last board meeting, some members opposed removal of the SROs because they were worried about legal ramifications. Well, last night, the City Council just passed a resolution agreeing to work with you all on amending or terminating the contract. So you're free to make your choice without fear and blame. Furthermore, the fact that some of you wanted to stay committed to the city and Urbana Police Department, although that may have seemed noble, it only proves you're not fully committed to the safety and well-being of the students. Your commitment is to the school district and its students, not the city and Urbana Police Department. Each decision you make should always come back to what is best for the students in your district. Data prove there's no positive effect on students with SROs. If anything, there are more negative impacts on students' mental health and educational involvement. Fact of the matter is, SROs exist to mediate criminal charges and arrests. Anything they do beyond that can have a safer, better, and cheaper alternative. Want better relations between cops and students? Recruit local police officers to join the CU one-to-one mentorship program or volunteer to tutor. Have the police come into the schools off-duty in plain clothes and with no weapons. This will actually build legit relationships with students and help them become better students. Do students, parents, or staff need advice on navigating the criminal justice system? Well, first off, in the SRO contract, officers aren't supposed to give legal advice, but regardless, maybe this topic would make a great elective, enrichment course, or requirement as part of school discipline. Youth can learn a lot about how to navigate the criminal justice system. Furthermore, students could benefit from knowing the repercussions of a criminal record. It might actually deter them from criminal behavior if they know they could lose their right to vote, ability to get housing, or even a job in the future. I heard it expressed that SROs are likely to be more understanding of students than outside officers called into the school, so they act as mediators of sorts. If that's the case, isn't that just an indictment of the general police force? It speaks volumes to the truth that police aren't equipped properly to deal safely with, quote, unruly children. The SROs are from the same pool of police. Sure, the current officers you have at the schools might be really good with kids and have some legit training under their belts, but their belts still hold weapons intended for potential use on a child. God forbid a student ever got injured or worse, killed by a cop, but if we're honestly looking at why these officers have weapons, that's the potential use of them. The message of the existence of these cops in the school is that students are potentially a danger and that danger needs to be removed. Think about how that message impacts a student's self-image and sense of safety. As I've asked before, are we really in the business of criminalizing our students? I say all this to show that there are alternatives to paying for cops in school. There are so many other wonderful tools and resources for students that truly assist them in their learning and growing. Get creative and/or utilize the opportunity to build community partnerships with some great organizations. Invest back in a restorative model for the schools, which includes the recruitment of Black educators, bilingual counselors, and trauma-informed educators. The truth is, times have changed. Things are not what they were like last year when the majority of you voted to pass the hiring of these 2 full-time officers. The COVID pandemic has drastically altered how we do our schooling. Plus, the national discourse about racial inequity and police brutality is finally at a loud enough level, none of us can simply go on to ignore the hurt and trauma inflicted upon Black and brown bodies, especially by police. The very least you can all do is open the discussion to the public and call for a vote on the cancellation or phasing out of the contract. The public has been writing and petitioning for months now, and you've ignored us until you were forced to approach the subject because of the budget. Sure, we can make this a budget issue, but it's also a moral or philosophical issue, and the board needs to open up public discourse and address the topic of SROs in this current climate. What do you really have to lose except proving you truly value your constituents' voices? I will end with this. The quality of a good person is measured by how they treat those who are most vulnerable. Honestly, ask yourselves, do SROs benefit your most vulnerable students? Are those tax dollars being used to best help and educate the most vulnerable students? Are your policies and practices protecting and respecting the most vulnerable students? If you uplift the least of these, the rest will benefit and rise up as well. Let's be good people and help these beautiful and brilliant students soar high. Thank you for your time, Sarah Hogue. From Beal or Bile Font, sorry, I'm getting that name wrong. I've read it before and I apologize for not getting it. Dear school board members, I am once again writing as a current student of UHS. As a student, I feel uncomfortable and unsafe with armed police officers roaming our hallways and classrooms. I would like to urge board members to move in the right direction and cancel the intergovernmental agreement between the school district and the city of Urbana and position yourselves with the local civil and human rights groups, such as the NAACP and ACLU, in opposing the SROs. Best regards, Beal Font. From Leslie Owens. Hello, I am an Urbana resident and I'm deeply concerned about the $327,000 that is currently being allocated to pay for police resource officers in Urbana schools. These funds are desperately needed to recruit and pay Black and bilingual educators and counselors. Additionally, police and schools uphold the school to prison pipeline for children of color. They do not keep our children safe, they put them at risk. I urge the Urbana School Board to remove police officers from our schools and to financially support the educators who care for and teach our children. Sincerely, Leslie Owens. From Janice Walker. Good day, Urbana 116 board members. It's really disheartening to listen and watch as these meetings continue to be dominated by the very important topic of SROs in our schools. It's clear that there is a divide amongst community members who agree and disagree as to whether we want to continue a contract between Urbana Police and our school district. As a member of the community and grandparent of a Unit 4 student, I believe we should be asking ourselves what makes a school a place to learn and be positively challenged, as well as prepared for the next chapter in life. Resources are the tools to make this happen, no matter what neighborhood you live in. We've tried SROs in our schools, and there's absolutely nothing that supports students having better outcomes because of their presence. Additionally, we know there is data that SRO presence in schools only exacerbates the school to prison pipeline. I think most people in this community would be supportive of officers and police departments to build healthier relationships with community. However, there is no data demonstrating that officers in schools contribute to a healthy academic environment. Until we work through all the trauma and division between community and police, they have no place in our schools as a full-time employee who makes more than most staff. Signed, Janice Walker, Urbana community member, former Urbana School District employee. P.S. It is fitting that today is International Day of Democracy. From Gabriel Nardi. Dear Urbana 116 school board members, let us follow up on the actions of the City Council yesterday and act now to end school resource officers in Urbana Public Schools. Though admirable in its intent to make schools safer for all, having police officers in schools is inappropriate. In order to be faithful to our goals of ensuring equity for our students, we can direct resources more effectively, as many other community members have suggested. As an institution, police nationally and locally have proven destructive in many ways. Our 116 mission statement calls for us to, quote, foster caring and nurturing relationships, end quote. The police are the last resort of failed relationship building. While we can respect police officers' commitment to protect and serve, they should not be any part of an educational system. You have shown us the budget deficit we are facing as a school system. Here is a prime place to start cutting to balance the budget in a way that many community members support. At this time of crisis in our society, we should be at the vanguard of removing barriers to the education of people of color. In 1966, this board took progressive strides to integrate the Urbana public schools at the urging of the Black community. Times have changed, but many issues remain. The seeds planted by those community members echo into today's vigilance. We call on you to act accordingly and take the police out of our schools. Thank you, Gabriel Nardi, Urbana 116 dual language teacher and parent. From Ravi Hasanadka. I'm a parent of a 6th grader at UMS, a 2nd grader at Leal, and a pre-K student at Urbana Early Childhood. I have lived in Urbana since 2014. I have no criminal record. I am a vascular surgeon. Nonetheless, when I drove to UMS a few weeks ago to pick up school supplies and saw what looked like a squad car parked in the lot, I felt my body tense up. Ensured I was driving slow in the lot and pulled into my parking lot carefully. That fear of being arrested when I see police for anything at any time is in my blood at all times. When I got out of the car to walk up to the school, I was relieved to notice it was an unmanned vehicle, so I could let my guard down. Then I was appalled to notice it was a shiny new appearing SUV for the school resource officer. I wondered if the school bought this vehicle so the SRO can patrol the middle school and high school complex. Then it comes back to the question of why the Board of Education is authorizing so much money in SROs. The intention of bringing a safe environment for learning is bringing the unintentional reality for many, including myself, of fear. Instead of funding fear, the schools should be looking at the restorative model for discipline beginning in elementary school, so by the time the kids are in middle school and high school, it is second nature. Money should be spent on trauma-informed educators. Recruitment should be focused on bringing in more educators of color and bilingual counselors, so the currently marginalized students can have a greater shot at succeeding. I'd previously heard members of the board were resistant to stop funding the SROs because of a commitment with the city of Urbana. Now that the city council has passed a resolution not to hold the board to that commitment, it would be the appropriate next step for the board to now act. If the board does not, then we will know that it was just an excuse to hide behind. Thank you for your time. Ravi Hasanadka. I'm sorry I mispronounced that twice. Greetings. My name is Cameron Emery. I'm a graduate of Urbana School District of the class of 2020 and former African American Club president. I now reside as a freshman at the illustrious North Carolina Central University. I recently came across the issue of the community asking for the board to remove the SRO from the building at the high school and the middle school, and I totally disagree with this demand from the community. As a former student of Urbana and a member of the Black community, I've always had a relationship with every resource officer that has come in the building. And as African-American male, you would think I would try to avoid having any connection with the police, but it's completely when it's the officers who want to make a relationship with us. In my 8 years in USD 116, I had only one bad experience with any police officer, and it was at a football game where 2 new administrators took upon themselves to insert the officers in a very misunderstood situation, and it was very much uncomfortable because we have never had to deal with SROs in our school, but with one email sent to our amazing superintendent, Dr. Ivory Tatum, the situation was handled within 24 hours, and apologies were made and did not have any issue after. That's the type of district we have. If there's a problem or if things are being done untraditionally, we have a support system that will come in and correct it. With this group in the community making the issue of removing the SROs a major problem, in which it's not a problem at all, I find it very disappointing that the energy is going to the wrong cause. I also find it very rude and disrespectful for a group of people speaking for the Black and Brown community as if they know the struggle or the experience we have with law enforcement. That is not right. We applaud you for using your voice as a microphone for us because we usually don't speak up, but speak with us and not for us. You should ask our opinion and let us lead the charge because we are as competent as any other racial group. Do not remove the SRO. The presence of them lets us know we are safe. We need to be safe and we will remain safe. Lastly, I have an issue of my own. In my 8 years of being in the district, I've met 3 board members that would of course be Dr. Ivory Tatum and former board president John Dimmitt and Mrs. Tori Exum. That is ridiculous that there's a group of people making decisions for the school and has never come and introduced themselves or never walked the hallways or even sat in and chatted with students at lunch hours. This has to change. The board has to get into the schools more often. You cannot make district decisions without seeing the district yourself. So go into the schools, view the climate of the school, talk to students and teachers, and be seen. New things the district should try. 1, connect with HBCUs to bring in more minority teachers and staff. 2, board member and administration team visit the schools twice a week. 3, create curriculum where every student is learning at AP level. 4, hire more minority support systems for our students. 5, seek more minority male teachers. It makes a difference. And 6, fund all the ethics groups and clubs. That was signed from Cameron Emery. From Dawn Navejas. Dear Dr. Avery Tatum and the Board of Education, my name is Dawn Navejas. I'm a USD 116 parent and community member, and I'm also the new bilingual coordinator at Urbana High School. My position entails coordinating the ESL and dual language programs and coaching teachers on linguistically and culturally responsive instructional strategies. I'm reaching out to you now regarding your decision of whether or not to renew the school resource officer contract. In particular, I'd like to address other ways that this large sum of money could be spent to help our students. Currently, there is not a single counselor, social worker, psychologist, student interventionist, or student engagement advocate at UHS who speaks Spanish. Considering our significant and growing numbers of Spanish-speaking students, this creates a tremendous gap in the support that we are able to provide our students. It also puts an inordinate burden on our family liaison to try to fill this need as only one person. With the pressing need for bilingual staff unmet, it is hard for me to understand why the board is considering spending over $300,000 on an armed police officer. This money could be used to employ multiple bilingual student engagement advocates or teaching assistants. Alternatively, it could be used to hire additional BIPOC educators and trauma-informed educators. All of these options would directly support our goals of increasing educational equity and racial justice in our district. They would also represent a more positive, student-centered means of ensuring safety and security in our schools. I am proud to be a part of USD 116, largely because of its commitment to equitable and restorative practices. I hope that the board will decide not to renew the SRO contract and to instead dedicate those funds toward crucial services that will directly benefit our diverse student body. Best, Dawn Navejas. From Chelsea Birchmeyer. Dear USD 116 board members, as the Urbana School District faces a budget shortfall of $1.5 million in 2020-2021, they do not need to spend $327,000 for police to patrol empty school buildings in Urbana. Instead, that money should be invested in the recruitment of Black educators, bilingual counselors, and trauma-informed educators with the funds allocated to SROs. The Urbana City Council voted last night to release the Board of Education from the SRO contract. So there is no excuse for the Board of Education to do what is best for Black students and families. It is time to remove SROs from Urbana schools. Best, Chelsea Birchmeyer. From Brooke Armstrong. Dear Urbana Board of Education, my name is Brooke Armstrong. I grew up in our Unit 4 schools. The schools are almost empty. Children are going hungry. Why would our district choose to spend almost $400,000 on positions that are not needed? School resource officers do not have specialized training in adolescent or childhood development. They are not mental health experts, social workers with licensed degrees, psychologists, or school counselors. They are not educators. They don't promote a safe educational environment for Black and brown youth. They are one of the many components to the school to prison pipeline. For multiple reasons, the board should reconsider using our taxpayer dollars on hiring SROs to patrol empty hallways. I would much rather see you take that money and put it towards our teachers or students. Thank you, Brooke Armstrong. From Alina Ahmed. Dear Board of Education, I'm writing today to demand that the Urbana School District returns to a restorative model that includes the recruitment of Black educators, bilingual counselors, and trauma-informed educators with the funds allocated to SROs. As the Urbana School District faces a budget shortfall of $1.5 million, they do not need to spend $327,000 for police to patrol empty school buildings in Urbana. The city of Urbana specifically expressed it will not sue if the SRO contract is canceled, so this cannot be used as an excuse to refuse our demands of ending USD's SRO contract with the city. Finally, board member John Dimmitt has made several problematic and racist remarks regarding those of us opposing SROs and the type of community we represent. John Dimmitt and the rest of the board need to understand that we represent this community and our voice matters and must be heard. Best, Alina Ahmed. From Ann Barger. Hi, it's time for Urbana to stop funding SROs in its schools. You're spending over $300,000 yearly on two people who are there to basically reinforce the school to prison pipeline. SROs in schools are there to turn minor violations into misdemeanors, not provide safety and security. Wasting education dollars on armed police needs to stop, and it needs to stop now. Please vote to end the contract with the city and start funneling that money where it belongs, into services that will actually help students get an education. Thank you. from Jamie Keener. To the Urbana Board of Education, I'm writing today in support of the motion to remove SROs from the Urbana School District budget for 2020-2021. As an Urbana resident, I find it highly concerning that the school district would even consider spending $327,000 to police public schools. Not only is there no conclusive evidence that SROs are beneficial to students and significant evidence that SROs negatively and disproportionately impact students of color, but this year specifically, there are no students in the public school buildings for the SROs to police. Spending such a significant amount of the school budget on policing empty buildings when the school district faces a $1.5 million budget shortfall helps no one. Instead, the Urbana Board of Education should consider using the money to build up the school district. Thank you for your time. Signed, Jamie Keener. From Jen Roth. Hello, my child is a student at UHS. She wasn't in the district when the contract with the Urbana Police Department was signed last year, so this is the first year that I've been able to weigh in on the SRO question as a parent. I watched the video of the September 1st school board meeting and was interested to learn that Chief Seraphin refused to allow SROs not to carry guns while in the schools, against the wishes of even those who wanted an expanded police presence. I understand that as individuals, the SROs have good relationships with some students and are able to connect them to resources in the community. However, the insistence of the police department that the people filling that role must be armed at all times makes me believe that the police department is the wrong partner for Urbana schools. For the amount of money the district is paying for 2 officers, it could afford to hire more than 2 additional trauma-informed mental health professionals and social workers who, one hopes, could do the useful things SROs do without having to bring guns into a place where nobody wants them. Signed, Jen Roth, Urbana, Illinois. From Cara Monroe. Dear Urbana School Board, as a 2019 graduate from Urbana High School, I'm a representative of this community and have a voice that deserves to be heard. With the school district facing a budget shortfall of $1.5 million in 2020-21, I find it very sad that you're deciding to spend $327,000 on fully armed SROs. This money can be better allocated to resources that are designed to support students in ways that SROs are not trained. Returning to a restorative practice model whilst hiring more Black educators, bilingual counselors, and trauma-informed educators is a much better use of these funds. This presence in our school works to support students who need it rather than meeting their trauma with force. I know some school board members believe that Urbana can be a model for how SROs can work in schools, but the fact is Urbana is not free from racism. In Urbana, Black students are 4.5 times as likely to be suspended as white students. It is your job to hire the employees who will support these students rather than SROs. I too remember the February 2019 fight that caused fear and the appeal for a larger sense of security inside schools. This environment is not created overnight with the addition of more SROs. It is earned through the time and resources that it takes to effectively use restorative practices and train educators. Now that the City Council has voted to negotiate a way out of the SRO contract for the school board if they wish it, there is no excuse not to cancel a contract that introduces a traumatic presence into schools that more negatively affects students of color. Sincerely, Cara Monroe, 2019 Urbana High School graduate. From Sophie Main. Good evening. Here's what I'm thinking. I don't care how you rebrand them, SROs are cops in school. $321,000 could go to resources for the youth instead of to threatening them. Cops in school are a threat, even if you call them SROs, especially for Black children who are already disproportionately punished in our school system while also disproportionately facing police brutality. Pretending we are all great at race relations is getting very hard to do. Please take a really hard look at what we are all saying, the history, present day climate, current statistics. Can we all get on the same page? Because it's hurting Black people to be in denial. Cops have been a threat to them historically and to this day, and I'll bet my precious dog that even if they stop disproportionately beating up, jailing, and killing Black people tomorrow, that wouldn't erase the memories of what we've seen them do. Why wouldn't y'all want to scare kids like that? You could choose to start change. You could all choose to start chipping away at a punitive, oppressive system and strive for a healthier one. Please choose what our souls are yearning for, what our hearts expected when we were young and tender. Community, compassion, fairness, love. Start with getting rid of cops in our schools. We will support you. Sophie Main. From Austin Hoffman. Dear Urbana Board of Education, my name is Austin Hoffman and I am an Urbana resident in Ward 5 and currently a graduate teaching assistant at UIUC. Prior to graduate study, I'd been an educator in many settings, including public schools. I'm writing you today to voice my support for ending the use of school resource officers in Urbana schools. The fact that the district has a budget shortfall of $1.5 million and is still allocating $327,000 for police is ludicrous, particularly considering the fact that students are learning remotely right now. But outside the context of the pandemic, police have no place in our schools. As many have already informed you, there is a growing body of research showing that SROs have no effect on reducing interpersonal conflict and violence in schools, nor in preventing school shootings. In fact, the presence of police in schools have been shown to exacerbate many of these issues, and they disproportionately target and discipline Black and brown students. Please do the sensible and just thing and terminate the SRO contract with the city of Urbana. Not only does it make fiscal sense, it far more importantly addresses a long history of racist surveillance and policing that has infected our public education system in this country. Thank you for your time. Sincerely, Austin D. Hoffman. From Logan Middleton, Dear Urbana Board, I'm writing this evening to demand that you get cops out of Urbana schools. School resource officers are cops, plain and simple. Cops have no place in spaces of education, much less anywhere else, and their very presence in school hallways, offices, and classrooms is antithetical to the goals of learning, inquiry, and study, as well as Black life and flourishing. As you all know, City Council recently voted 5-2 to release the Urbana Board from its SRO contract early. So do it. No more cops in schools. Even if you, as board members, were all to overlook the fact that policing is and always has been a white supremacist institution, Urbana schools are still shelling out over $300,000 for armed cops to patrol empty schools. This is an absolute travesty. Get cops out of schools now. Police free USD 116 now. Signed, Logan Middleton. From Lexi Ray, to whom it may concern on the school board. As a member of the community, I ask you to heavily consider terminating the contract with the student resource officers. The money should be used in a way that will positively affect the students, such as social workers. Instead, this money is being wasted ensuring that empty halls are safe. With the decision to offer no repercussions for leaving the contract, there is no reason not to. If you choose to continue the contract, please explain to us why you thought this was the best option. Have a productive meeting, Lexi Rayburn. This one, lengthy, okay. This is signed by many. Dear Urbana School Board, the Trauma Resilience Initiative, a local nonprofit organization that has been working with the Urbana schools over the past 3 years, applauds the district's mission, quote, to ensure all students acquire knowledge, develop skills, and build character, end quote, guided by the values that, quote, caring and nurturing relationships are key to building trust, setting high expectations, and challenging and supporting all learners, end quote. These statements, if enacted with fidelity, are consistent with the principles of trauma-informed practice. However, as currently implemented, the use of school resource officers belies these principles. We, the TRI board, urge you to use these funds to promote research-based, trauma-informed practice. Research on childhood trauma estimates between 47 to 67% of all pre-K to 12th grade students have experienced at least one adverse childhood experience, aka ACEs. 22%, almost 1 in 4, have experienced at least 2 ACEs, which has been proven to have a detrimental effect in a child's development and can negatively impact educational and health outcomes. The CDC has determined that ACEs are common across households and at all income and education levels and across all races. We believe it is important to frame this decision in both national research and community data. We wonder, do you know what is the average ACEs score of the school district? Do the decisions you make and support take this data into consideration? Trauma-informed education adheres to the trauma-informed principles of safety, trustworthiness and transparency, peer support, collaboration and mutuality, empowerment and choice, cultural, historical, and gender issues. A trauma-informed district would also exhibit the 4 R's of trauma-informed practice. Realize, all members at all levels of the organization or system comprehend what trauma is and the impact of trauma on individuals, families, and groups. Recognize, people in the system can operationally identify the signs of trauma. Respond, the system applies the principles of a trauma-informed approach to all interactions. resist re-traumatization. The system prevents re-traumatization through consistent accountability to trauma-informed practice. This requires continual practice with opportunities for reflection and growth. To our knowledge, police officers are only required to have 1 3-hour de-escalation training. Also, the officers do not incorporate reflective supervision in their practice, a best practice in mental health fields. This may explain why research has found that when controlling for poverty, disorderly conduct arrests were double at schools with SROs compared to non-SRO schools. This is called the, quote, criminalization of normal adolescent behavior. Children with disabilities are particularly at higher risk of experiencing lasting and severe consequences if SROs unnecessarily criminalize school-related misbehavior. Nationally, Black students comprised 36% of arrests in the 2015-2016 school year, despite representing only 15% of students. 33% of those arrests were white, despite representing 50% of students. A single arrest impacts a student's achievements and leads to a 25% increase in the likelihood of dropping out of school. Research does show that parents and students do perceive that schools are safer. Perceptions based upon simple surveys are tricky. When our school district has 52% of students and families of color and 72.2% of low-income students, caring for every child means addressing the needs of the many children who fear or may have negative perceptions of police officers, who, without the training, continual practice, and reflection time, are much more likely to re-traumatize a student, further compromising the student's ability to succeed. Please reallocate these funds to practices that truly increase school safety and student success. Signed respectfully, the Trauma Resilience Initiative Board, who are Elise Belknap, Malcolm Hill, Ulanda Hunter, Leanne Kelly, Ruby Mendenhall, Liz Perricone, Terrence Thomas, Irene Weathersby, and Karen Sims, Executive Director. From Julia Rush. Hello, Board of Education members. I urge you all to revisit the proposed budget. The current budget proposes $327,000 to be spent on SROs, cops, in our schools. Before getting to the extremely large social justice concern this poses, I know there are better ways to be spending all of that money, especially when we're in a pandemic and a recession that is without a doubt deeply affecting our families and community. There are still students without Chromebooks, learning supplies, internet. There are always teachers in need of resources and supplies. There are always families that are struggling to access food and basic necessities. There are large deficits in mental health care and trauma-informed support for students, family, and staff. The list of the ways the district could revisit the budget and spend that money to directly help our community goes on. But at the end of the day, the money is not the main issue. The issue is the effect SROs have on our students. Our students are traumatized by what they are seeing and experiencing, what they have seen and experienced, what generations before them saw and experienced. I could tell you many anecdotes from my students, fourth graders expressing fear of police, ways they have directly been mistreated by police, fear of their older siblings, being around an SRO carrying a gun around their hallways, how the policing system has harmed and broken their family, and so much more. Considering the overwhelming violence that police enact, sorry, I lost my line here. Considering the overwhelming violence that police enact on Black and brown people every day, many students simply do not feel safe around cops in their school. As educators, it is our job to create an environment in which students feel safe, and putting armed police in schools is not helping many of our students feel safe. As educators, it is also our obligation to put a halt to the school-to-prison pipeline. Having a police presence in schools directly contributes to the school-to-prison pipeline, disproportionately affecting Black and brown students. The prison industrial complex in the U.S. is simply slavery under another name. Budgeting to police our children with armed cops and zero tolerance, reminiscent policies, when we know that raises the chances of our kids being a part of the modern slavery prison system. We cannot allow this to happen. Our district's mission statement says we work to support all of our students in their path to, quote, achieve personal greatness and help create a better global society by providing innovative, comprehensive programs, respecting individual learning styles and cultural differences, and fostering caring and nurturing relationships while engaging each student, even family, and the entire community, end quote.
Right now, our district has the opportunity to be innovative and create comprehensive programs that focus on uplifting our students, supporting them in dealing with trauma and mental health concerns, fighting for justice in our schools and community, and pushing against the carceral practices used in our nation's schools. It is an opportunity to foster caring and nurturing relationships by rejecting the status quo of compliance and focusing on justice-centered practices that build community and social emotional skills. I would also like to quickly comment that considering our district's mission to engage the community, the many voices from community members that may not have a direct connection to our schools should definitely not be ignored or discounted. As much as I would love to use this space to discuss those amazing things we could be doing instead of having SROs, but that is a job for all of us. Listen to your teachers and staff members today. Listen to your community. Listen to the experiences of others who have been wronged by the policing system both in and out of school. Revisit this budget. Put our students first and do not put their oppressors in the environment where they are trying to learn and grow. Thank you, Julia Rush, Urbana 4th grade teacher. From Connie Dillard Myers. I am not in agreement with the removal of the resource officers at the Urbana schools unless it is proven that they are no longer needed or an alternative program is in place to replace them. The board should not be intimidated by the loudest group who happens to have differing points of view or opinions. The same violence we see in the community is also occurring in our schools. And before we lose control of our schools again, we need to be sure we do not have the problems the district districts have been facing. We have to approach the problem at its core before we lose our community, our public schools, and our best and brightest students. We want our community to grow and thrive, not be controlled by some left-wing group who offers no solutions, but uses intimidation tactics against board members. Signed, Connie Dillard Myers, Champaign County Board, District 10. And from Siobhan Brown Walker, greetings Urbana Board. I am Siobhan Brown Walker, resident of Urbana, Illinois. I'm an educator with experience in social work and human services. More importantly, I am a Black parent of 3, 2 of whom graduated from UHS. My most recent graduate finished in May 2020. I'm writing to express my support for the SRO program and the hiring of 2 full-time officers. Let me first say, I completely understand and relate to the fear and concerns expressed by some community members for our students of color when it comes to police presence in our schools, or even more accurate, police presence in our community. I've lived and witnessed the contentious relationship in my entire life. Institutional racism and the implicit bias that perpetuates it is real. But to be clear, I am not anti-police, as I believe they play a vital role in our community. I also believe there are enough decent police officers out there to be a part of the solution that ends the racial and economic inequality that exists in our society. I am very concerned about Black youth in this community. While there are some community efforts that seek to support and address their trauma, these interventions and supports are woefully insufficient. We're certainly failing to reach many of our Black children as a village. The crime and violence in our community, the educational disservice, the lack of resources necessary to properly fund schools and youth programming, we are missing the mark. The good news is more and more of us are acknowledging our failure in regards to our Black youth, and we are refusing to be silent about it, to turn a blind eye or do nothing any longer. The bad news is the lack of agreement on how to best serve our Black children, address their trauma, and change their outcomes and trajectories. That being said, I understand why SROs are a highly debated issue, but I want to encourage the board to move forward with the hiring of SROs because they're needed in our schools at this time. I would like to see an integrated model that includes clinical professionals and SROs. While I wholeheartedly agree with the need for more social and clinical services in schools, I believe we need all these professionals and public servants to wrap around our children and team with educators to protect and improve the lives and well-being of students. I am employed in another school district and I see resource officers doing their job well. They are truly a resource for students, a resource for parents, a resource for administrators and teachers. I don't understand why it has to be either social workers, mental health professionals, restorative practice, etc., or police. Is there not a place, a role for both in our schools? I know some people say police have no place in a school building, but I beg to differ. Let's not be naive or willfully ignorant. There is a lot going in our schools with our youth. It is going to take all of us working together to help them progress and manage life. There's a role for everyone in the betterment of the school environment for students. I will share that I did not feel my son was safe while he was a student at UHS. My son attended UHS when there were fights pretty much daily. School conflicts would spill over into the community and vice versa. I don't believe there are enough administrators in UHS, nor are they equipped to handle the most severe discipline and behavior incidents. It's also unfair to teachers, as they are often first responders when chaos breaks out in the building. They need help. More eyes, more hands, more ears to the ground. A lot of situations can be nipped in the bud before they escalate into a serious problem when there is adequate adult supervision. The bottom line for me when it comes to SROs is all kids deserve to feel safe at school, and it is the district's responsibility to ensure safety. A partnership with UPD in the form of SROs seems like an appropriate way to bring stakeholders together for the sake of student well-being. My only prerequisite would be that any SROs hired will be specifically trained to work within a school environment with youth from a developmental model. Make sure they understand adolescent behavior and thinking. Make sure they have the willingness and disposition to establish relationships with young people. Vet their tenure and background as an officer. If all is in order, let them help us serve our children. Signed, Siobhan Brown Walker, Urbana, Illinois. And that concludes the public comment portion of our meeting. Thank you everyone for bearing with me. I'm gonna just get myself organized here and take a breath and a drink of water, and then I'll continue with the agenda if you'll give me 2 seconds. Thank you for that.
Thank you, Ann.
There is a call tonight for an executive session after this evening's current meeting for the purpose of the appointment, employment, compensation, discipline, performance, or dismissal of specific employees of the district or legal counsel for the district, including hearing testimony on a complaint lodged against an employee or against legal counsel for the district to determine its validity. Illinois School Code 5122C1 and litigation when an action against, affecting, or on behalf of the particular district has been filed and is pending before a court or administrative tribunal, or when the district finds that an action is probable or imminent, in which case the basis for the finding shall be recorded and enter into the closed meeting minutes. So that will happen tonight after we conclude our public meeting. Now I need an approval of tonight's agenda.
So moved.
Second.
Moved and seconded. Can I have a roll call, please?
Member Carter,
Yes.
Member Demmett,
Yes.
Member Patton,
Yes.
Member Pulaski,
Yes.
Member Fisher votes yes, Vice President Exum,
Yes.
and President Hall.
Yes. There are no commendations or recognitions tonight, I don't believe. There's no policy review, no communications. So we will move on to 10.0 administrative reports, starting with Riley Norton giving us our 6th-day enrollment report.
Thank you. I'm going to go ahead and share my screen. Good evening, everyone. Tonight I have a more detailed update for you on the 6th day. Yes.
You're there you go.
Can you hear it? Can you see it?
Yep, we couldn't see
Okay.
it at first. Can you make it a little
Oh.
bigger?
There we go. Hopefully you can see that. So from our last week, a couple of weeks ago, we thought that we would see an increase in our numbers. In the past couple of weeks, we've seen that we have about 26 additional students that we got across the district. By breaking these numbers down further, we can see where our students that they've chose some alternatives with the pandemic. When looking at the pie graphs from last year to this year, we see some significant differences. For example,
private school increased last year from 16 students in private school to 45 this year. Homeschool was from 19 to 50. And then our students that we have not been able to connect with, it was at 96 last year to 150 this year. Also to note, there's some decreases in students that are leaving the state, and that has went down from 86 to 48. Out of town went from 16 to 6, and other counties other than Champaign went from 118 to 43. Students enrolled in Unit 4 previously were 167 last year compared to 96 this year. Therefore, we're seeing a lot of other decisions made as a result of the pandemic. School staff have reached out to families, have invited families in to register, and have even conducted home visits. We still are going to break apart these numbers further to continue to reach out to our families, for our families that we haven't heard from. And again, we're down 343 students from where we were last year at this time. Any questions?
Hi, Kim, this is Peggy. So, well, just first off, I hope you'll send this graphic to us, because I mean, it's enlarged, but my old eyes still don't see it very well, but your verbal report helped a great deal. Of the 343 students, how many, it was hard for me to keep track of all your numbers, how many would you say you can account for in your report? How many of those 343?
Right, so unknown at this time, we have about 160. Now with this report, this is our total drops. So we had over 500 students that have dropped, but then again, we had new students that were added to as well. Let me share another report just so that the public can see as well. And I think that will help better. Okay. So if we look at this one, you can see the difference from last year. So you'll see that King is down 46, and you'll see the percentage on the side. Leal's down 58. Dr. Williams is actually up 15. Thomas Paine is down 44. Wiley down 37. Yankee Ridge 49, with a total in elementary of 219. UMS is down 108. The high school is down 16. Really pleased with those results. I know they've made a lot of contacts. So total secondary is 124, with being down 343 across the district. And then we have early childhood that was not included in that count that is down 88.
Okay. And could you just one last question, the category not connect with, you said it went from 96 last year to 150 this year. Can you just explain exactly what that means, not connect with?
So that means we haven't heard from those families. We haven't received a request from another district for records, or by reaching out to the families with attempting to reach out, they haven't specified that they're going to be enrolling elsewhere. So we haven't been able to determine homeschooling or
Gotcha.
what method of learning those students are doing at this point.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Kim, I had a question. I know that the last meeting when we were talking about this, I think one of you said that there were people who inadvertently didn't register at all over the summer because they didn't know that they had to, or because of the COVID thing. And there were people who wanted to sign up for remote learning when we thought that in-person was a possibility, and yet didn't understand the process. So where did that fall in the numbers in the final analysis?
So leading up, even before 6-day enrollment, we made a lot of contacts, just trying to clear up the misconceptions, because originally I think that some families, we had to explain the difference between homeschooling and remote learning. And then if parents opted to choose homeschooling, then they would not be able to utilize district resources, have access to teachers. So I think that helped quite a bit, but still, you know, we're going to continue. We're not happy with those numbers, and we're going to continue to reach out to our families to improve on that.
Okay, thanks. Any other board questions?
John, so we're faced with a big quandary here, as I think one of the emails that Ann read earlier tonight that was about mental health versus physical health and the need for in present face-to-face teaching. I know that I've talked to a few people who've withdrawn their children from Urbana and gone to private schools. They'd be in your private school count because the schools are open and their children can attend and get face-to-face instruction. Are you finding, is that something that we should be aware of? Is that something that's been blown out of proportion? What's your read on that situation?
Yeah, I mean, if you look at the numbers compared to last year, you know, it's 4 times the amount for private school, where it was 16 last year to 45, you know, with homeschooling as well. So I think that, I mean, you can say that number, I mean, it's increased 4 times the amount. So you are seeing that, you know, that's my perception of it as well, that you have, you know, families that, and we heard from a mother tonight that really want their kids in school. I mean, we have a percentage that really just, you know, or based on the resources they have at home or work schedules, they don't have the ability to do it at home.
All right.
Any other questions or comments?
I guess it's, you know, since tonight's about budgeting as well, I didn't know what impact these numbers are going to have with regards to the allocations we get back from the state, or not, or if it even affects our expenses. If we have lower student count, I was wondering what kind of budgetary effects are going to be from these lower numbers.
State aid does operate a year late, so these would not affect current revenues, but could affect future revenues.
It's not state aid anymore. It's evidence-based funding. So, and it's specifically not tied directly to enrollment like general state aid used to be. So it's, there's like 17,000 data points that go into the evidence-based funding model. So, and enrollment obviously is a big one, but, and it also depends on every other district in the state and the adequacy levels. And there's just so many different things that go into play with that. It's very hard to estimate what the impact will be, but it's not a direct proportional relationship like it used to be.
It just adds more uncertainty for sure.
Yes, it does.
And we do still have 2 weeks. So we, you know, you guys are familiar with fall housing. Fall housing is that data point, September 30th, October 1st, where we pull our student enrollment numbers for grants and for other special programs. So we are going to really hit the ground hard these next 2 weeks, and all those unknowns that Kim talked about, or families who are still held up with registration, making those phone calls, having people come in side by side if we need to, and supporting them. They can come to the learning labs and register where we have computers available. So we're going to try to do our due diligence to get as many of those folks, those negative numbers down as much as we can between now and September 30th.
And it's not just one data point anymore, or one point of the year. It's average between the October enrollment numbers and March 1st enrollment numbers. So it's they'll take that into account as well.
Yeah, we'll be sharing this information further with our school support teams. We have done some district reports so that we have each and every student. So we have every student as I said, that we haven't heard from families, that we'll continue those efforts.
Okay. Any other comments or questions? Well, thank you very much for keeping us informed. I hope the numbers get better for us all.
Thank you, Kim.
Okay, moving on to 11.0 action items. This is by consent. So 11.1 is approval of, I think I can read all these together, can I not? And then get a vote for everyone. Okay, 11.1 is the minutes of the August 18th business meeting and the September 1st study session. 11.2 is bills and checks. We have education fund bills in the amount of $912,200. Operations and maintenance fund bills in the amount of $281,300. Working cash bonds, $18,000. School facility occupancy tax in the amount of $6,300. Tort, $146,400. Life safety levy in the amount of $16,400. Payroll, $3.1 million. Urbana adult education, $50,000. 11.3, we have no interfund loans to report. And 11.4, actually, well, we can vote on everything all together at once, I suppose, but I know that we have personnel items and administrative personnel items, so I don't know if it's okay if we can group them all together with one voice vote. Is that okay? Okay. We have personal items in 11.4, and I'm going to let Angie have a word on 11.5, which is an administrative personnel item. You can go ahead, Angie.
All right, good evening, everyone. Dr. Ivory Tatum, is Erica on the Zoom?
Yes, she is.
All right. So Erica Uscali began her career as a middle school teacher and spent 10 years in the classroom teaching English language arts and social studies to 7th and 8th graders. She taught in West Africa before moving stateside to teach in Chicagoland and the St. Louis areas. Following her time in the classroom, Erica became the Assistant Executive Director for the Association of Illinois Middle Level Schools, where she led a large network of middle grade schools across the state and coordinated comprehensive school reform efforts in very needy schools. When an opportunity opened up to begin working with the Regional Office of Education, Erica moved into the role of school and district improvement coach and providing professional development, which is where she first had the opportunity to work with Urbana. She helped lead our district efforts in the restructuring of Urbana middle school and high schools and provided support during those transitions. After receiving her master's degree and principal certification, Erica wanted the opportunity to put her new credentials to work and became the transformation officer for the Danville District 118 with their school improvement grant at Danville High School. Near the end of her time in Danville, Erica was offered the opportunity to move into a position of leadership for a national educational organization and became the executive director of the National Forum to Accelerate Middle Grades Reform. At the National Forum, Erica oversaw a national network of middle grade schools, as well as such programs as the Schools to Watch and International Schools to Watch recognitions and School Reform Process, an annual national conference, federal grant work in multiple states, conducted extensive middle grades research, advocated for the middle grades and young adolescents around the world and on Capitol Hill, and worked with various groups and organizations such as Johns Hopkins University and International Special Olympics to promote best practices in education and inclusive opportunities for all students. During this time, Erica also received her specialist degree and superintendent certification. Erica is excited to have the opportunity to work with Urbana 116, and we are very excited that Erica has accepted this position pending board approval. So please welcome Erica Uscali. Erica, if you have any words that you'd like to say.
And for the public, please say which position it is.
She is the director of curriculum, and is it student learning, Kim?
Yes, that's correct.
Okay, Erica, did you want to say anything?
I do. Thank you all so much. I am very excited to be back working with Urbana. In the work that I've done with Urbana in the past, I've always known that you had a district that was very progressive and willing to do whatever it took to make a difference in the lives of students. And so I am thrilled to be part of the team, and I thank you so much for the opportunity.
Welcome.
Thank you.
Welcome aboard. It's great to see you.
Thank you.
I would move the consent agenda.
Seconded.
Moved and seconded. Could I have a roll call, please?
Member Carter,
Yes.
Member Demmett,
Yes.
Member Patton,
Yes.
Member Pulaski,
Yes.
Member Fisher votes yes. Vice President Exum,
Yes.
and President Hall.
Yes, motion passes. So congratulations and welcome aboard.
Thanks so much.
Yes, congratulations.
Welcome, Erica.
You.
Thank you. Okay, moving on, we have some individual action items in the form of gifts. So please bear with me. I hope I don't mispronounce anybody. First up, we have a gift from Sue Aldridge and Friends, who donated over 500 handmade masks for our staff and students. From Mary Lemming of Urbana, we got a donation of a variety of cleaning supplies and hand sanitizer for the district's use. Scott Bennett made a donation through the Champaign-Urbana Schools Foundation of $1,225 to support remote learning by purchasing 5 Wi-Fi hotspots to help connect families. The Gerber School at Cunningham Children's Home donated a large variety of notebooks and graph notebooks to be distributed to all district schools. The Flois family, I believe, from Urbana donated to the Karen Bush Trust. And the St. Luke CME Church collected school supplies and monetary donations to purchase supplies for students in Urbana School District. CU Divas donated a large variety of school supplies to Thomas Paine Elementary School. And lastly, DeAndre Hendricks from Midlothian, Illinois donated $1,800 worth of shoes for high school boys to the Urbana High School. So there is that and the budget resolution, but I think we'll pull.
I would move the
Thank you.
approval of the gifts.
Thank you.
I'll second that.
Moved and seconded. Roll call, please.
It's a voice vote.
No, everything's roll call.
Oh, I'm sorry, you're right.
Ruth Ann, you're muted.
Hold on. Okay, there we go. Carter.
Yes.
Okay, and Member Demmett,
Yes.
Member Patton,
Yes.
Member Pulaski,
Yes.
Member Fisher votes yes. Vice President Exum,
Yes.
and President Hall.
Yes, motion passes and thank you notes will be sent. Okay, last up on our agenda is 12.2 fiscal year 21 Urbana District and Adult Education Budget Resolution, where we are calling for the approval of the budget being requested. So first I need a motion on the floor. Do I have a motion to approve?
Well, and if it's okay, I'd like to make some remarks about the budget, and I will conclude with a proposal to move the budget.
We need to have a motion on the floor to begin discussing.
Yeah, right. Fine. I'll move to approve the budget that was proposed at our last meeting.
Oh, okay.
Okay, then do we need a second?
I will second that.
Okay, moved and seconded. Now I guess we can open it up for discussion, please.
Okay.
And just FYI, I do have some presentation items I wanted to present regarding the budget. as
Oh,
well.
Sorry, yeah.
Well, we're fine now.
Let you,
Whatever you wanted to go first. Do you want me to go first?
yeah, I mean, that would be relevant to all of us.
I will go quickly. I just wanted to share my screen real quick. That is not the one that I want you to see. Let's see.
Oh, that's nice.
Are you seeing the memo?
Well, we're seeing your
No,
kids and your
seeing
grandson.
family pictures.
Very nice.
That's not what I wanted to do. Let's stop sharing.
The wrong screen.
A nice diversion.
Now, are you seeing the memo?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay. Okay, so first I just wanted to start off, since we presented the budget on September 1 at the last meeting, we did make a few changes of things that came up. So I figured while I was going through and making some changes, I went ahead and made some other changes. So while the auditors were here, they did mention that the GASB 84, it's a government standards board, accounting standards board requirement. We are going to have to start accounting for activity funds in our AFR, our annual financial report at the end of the year, which we've never done before. So we have to actually budget for the activity funds for the first time. So I did have to add revenue and expenses of $400,000 to the education fund for activity funds, just to have one line item for each, so that we can report on those at the end of the year. No effect on surplus or deficit, no effect on fund balance, the revenues equal expenses. So that's just something that's a change for this year for the first time. I did update salaries in the ed fund just with some new information of about 68,000. So that increased our expenditures to 47,589. Grant fund, again, just some adding carryover for Title I, nothing major there. And then working cash is where we added most of the projects that Randy had been working on getting estimates over the summer. So we did find out that we have to add a roof to the Urbana Indoor Aquatic Center. That's something that's just happened recently. We just got an estimate. And unfortunately, according to our agreement with the park district, the school district is responsible for the envelope of the building. So although we share all other expenses for operations and maintenance on the inside of the building, the roof is actually all ours. So that is being held down right now by sandbags. So we're hoping to get that bid out very quickly to get that roof replaced. We had 2 Leo chillers that have gone down that we're going to have to replace, as well as I believe we have a boiler that's getting paid from life safety funds, correct, Randy?
Yes.
I'm sure that's true, which was already in the budget. So that's not an add here. And then we also, again, because this is our working cash bonds, our bonds that were sold in 2019, I had already budgeted the full amount of those to be spent. So as we've added these projects, it basically reduced the amount that we have available for the remaining projects. So it's not an overall increase in the budget. We do have to are planning on spending out those funds this year, but we wanted to make sure that we had that full amount budgeted. So it is no impact on the total expenditures for working cash. And then just a small increase in working cash, our internal bank, the Fund 70, just to balance our transfers, just a small change there. So that's all the changes that were made since you saw the budget before. So let me get into the next item. Any questions on that before I move on? Biggest change being the activity funds on that one. Before I go to this one though, let's see, I want to talk about okay, are you seeing the pink one?
Nope, not yet.
It says my screen sharing is paused. Let me start it again. Now do you see it?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay. So this is what was provided in your packets, but what was added from last presentation was we did add the fund balances in here. So again, audit is not completed yet, but these are closer than they were 2 weeks ago. So the beginning fund balance is indicated, and then you also have ending fund balance. These are cash basis fund balances. So it's basically whatever our cash was at June 30, 2020 is what is here. I always separate out that TIF3 escrow to make sure that that is not part of the fund balances you see in bold. The red is separate from that. So that is money that we want to keep separate and not spend that TIF 3 escrow, because that does have a possibility that we may have to repay that money back to OSF.
And we should note that a lot of these fund balances are severely affected by the delay in tax receipts from the county clerk's office.
Yes, they have been. The beginning ones are. The ending fund balance is assuming that we get everything though, John. So I will talk about that in a minute, just to go over what the trend is here. But we've been severely impacted the last couple of years. The other thing I wanted to point out on this before we move on is, I think I pointed this out last time, the only fund that really shows a huge current year deficit is the working cash bonds again, and that is because a lot of those projects that I just talked about, that is spending out. We've got a fund balance to begin with. That's that $3 million that we sold, and we've been spending that down. So that is money that we definitely have on hand based on those working cash bonds we sold in 2019. So any questions on that before I go to my last slide? Let's do this differently. There we go. Now you see the bright yellow one. So this is basically a graphic that just kind of shows what our history has been. And again, excluding that TIF 3 escrow. We had a fairly healthy fund balance in 2017 and 2018. As you know, the 2018, or I'm sorry, FY19 was the year where we did have those tax delays. All of this is based though completely on cash basis, and cash basis means that if the money is not recorded, or the revenue is not recorded until you actually receive it. So we are completely at the mercy of the treasurer and how those taxes are received every year, as far as how they can be recognized in our financial records. So the same goes for expenditures. We don't record expenditures until we actually pay the bills or write the checks, which we have control over that. We don't have control over when the taxes are received. So when we had that $9.6 million decline right here from FY18 to FY19, that was the year we had the tax delays, where the tax bills went out late. That completely caused our fund balance to drop, because again, this is a snapshot at June 30th. So this is one day in time what our cash balances were on June 30th of each fiscal year. So if we didn't get the taxes until July 1, it's going in the following fiscal year. That's why those tax receipts are so important to this, but it's all timing. So this big decline we saw from 18 to 19, we initially attributed that because it was about 8.3 million of that was the tax delays, but there was some deficit spending in there as well. I think some of that has been masked just because we've been having so much of an untimely receipt of taxes that it's making some of these years look better than what they actually were. We did have probably about $1.3 million of deficit spending in FY19, but we had budgeted for about 600,000 of that. So we had planned on having some deficit spending that year. It just ended up being a little bit more than what we expected. And if you recall, in addition, that year is the year that OSF was part of they got sent the tax bill. They were part of our extension, but they were not allowed. I mean, they didn't have to pay their tax bill. So that was about $800,000 that we didn't receive. You might recall that when it was on that summary sheet for that fiscal year as a possibility, and that did happen. The tax bills were never paid by OSF, so that was money we lost right off the top. So for FY20, the deficit pretty much stayed about the same. So our balance was still negative, but so we didn't add to it that much either. So that was a good thing. The revenues and expenses were more balanced for that year. So we had about a $4.3 million deficit at the end of June 30, 20. We did again have a tax delay. So the money with the 1 year problem we thought was going to be taken care of in FY20 was not. We had another tax delay. But for the year, we only had about $440,000 of deficit spending. So that's good. But for this final year, the year that we're approving tonight, the We're estimating about a $3.3 million surplus. And again, assuming now finally that those taxes are being received, we're improving and we're getting our fund balance back to almost zero. We still obviously need to improve it above that, but we're catching up so that those tax receipts, hopefully this year, will all be received in June like we normally have. So I just wanted to show that trend so the board could see those 2 years that have been really caused by the untimely tax receipts. But we as an administrative team, I know are going to be, even though there's lots of unknowns and we cannot control the revenues, we've got a lot of declines in revenues that we're estimating this year, and hopefully all those won't come to be. But if they do, the thing we do have control over somewhat is the expenses, and we will do what we can to try to hold the expenses in line and reduce those wherever possible. So know that we will be keeping more of an eye on this than normal. I think a lot of times we look at the budget once a year, and I think we might have to spend some more time looking at it this year and doing some more. At least as a administration, we're going to be spending some more time looking at it to see what we can do to try to help improve our fund balances. So.
And Carol, when you project into the future by history, you have usually project expenditures at a level that actual expenditures as compared to projected expenditures are usually between 1% and 2%.
Yeah.
In other words, 98 to 99%. And so on a $70 million budget, even just with past trends, there could be a swing here of $700,000.
Yes, I mean, I think obviously FY20 that we just ended, I think we were about $1 million under expenditures. So we ended up pretty good for that year. But again, we would have expected that because we had a lot of things that didn't happen from March through the end of the school year due to the shutdown. So, but yeah, expenditures usually are very, very close, but it's the revenues that we don't have a lot of control over revenues. And especially this year, it seems like there's going to be a lot of things that we're going to have to just wait and see.
Carol, quick question.
Mm-hmm.
In comparing like 2018 to the estimated fund balance in 2021 on this graph, I'm wondering why 2018 is $5 million in the black, but 2021 is basically even with.
Because as I stated, we've actually had some deficit spending during these 2 years that are negative. Yeah. Although the taxes were the hugest part of that, we did have, like I said, $1.3 million of deficit spending here, and deficit spending in FY20 of about $440,000. And even in this year, even though we have a surplus, as we're showing, again, every time the taxes are delayed, that revenue gets kicked into the next year. Mm-hmm. So the fund balance, like I stated this at the last meeting, the fund balance, the surplus that we have in FY21 is because those taxes keep getting kicked into the following year. So I'm assuming that in 2021 we get caught up, and that's why there's a surplus in that year. That's why the fund balance, the deficit fund balance is we're getting out of deficit, at least almost back to zero for FY21.
And if you break it down by funds, we're actually making considerable progress as we set out to do in 2018 in erasing we're putting a lot more revenue into O&M and IMRF in order to erase past multiple year of deficit spending in those particular funds.
Yep. Yeah. Most of the fund balances, again, back on that other page, I think O&M is about the worst at about 2 million.
Yeah, but you're cutting it in half. You're cutting
it. That's a lot better than what it used to be. Yeah. So, but I think those of you that have been around a while know that we've been really trying to hold up the education fund as well during tax caps, and And unfortunately, I don't know how much longer we're going to be able to do that, but it's, we've held it up for a long time to the detriment of some of these other funds, but O&M is one of them. We are trying to take care of and get that one out of deficit.
I think all of them that are in deficit, if you throw that pink chart back up, all of them that were in deficit are improving dramatically. We thought it would take 3 to 5 years, and you're going to get it done in about a year, 2 years, in 2 years.
Or you can't see the whole thing, but
So right there, O&M dropped from a negative 3.4 to a negative 1.9.
but remember, these negatives were because the taxes were delayed too, not just in the education fund. That these negative fund balances were in all the funds,
Okay.
all the funds that levy taxes anyway, which would be, debt service, transportation.
But the current year positive numbers are pretty big in those funds relative to the size of the budget.
Yep.
In those funds.
Okay, so that's all I wanted to say. I wanted to point all that out and explain the fund balance, and I will let the board go back if there's no other questions. Let you go back to what you guys were going to talk about.
Well, I
Thank
have
you,
a
Carol.
quick question too. Sorry about the activity spending, Carol, that you mentioned. Is that new item that you just mentioned? Could you explain what that is covering? Because that's not the same thing as what the board approved last year to give discretionary money to programs, right?
No. This is the middle school and high school have activity funds. These are basically student activity funds that the middle school and high school control. They have separate cash accounts for that, but they're requiring, it's part of the audit every year. It's one of those pages in the very back if you ever look through the audit report. But they're now requiring that actually be part of the what we have to budget. They want us to actually bring those into the education fund, whereas before they've always been separate. They've been a separate cash account. We report on them separately. They want us to bring it in as part of the education fund. So that 400,000 is the total combined middle school and high school activity funds, student activity funds.
We get that report monthly. It usually.
Yeah, that's true. You do get a board report every month with the activity and trust.
It usually holds about $1 million. Or a little over $1 million, maybe 1.4.
We still, for some reason, they're not bringing the trust funds in. It's just the activity funds. So this 400,000 is just the student activity funds.
Oh, okay.
That's interesting.
They've delayed it. They were supposed to start it this year. Now it's been delayed until June of 21 that we have to start, but we had to budget for it this year so we would be able to report on it. So.
Any other questions for Carol? Okay, thank you, Carol, very much.
Thank you.
Thank you, Carol.
Okay, further board discussion on anything?
Well, I guess I'd like to go back, if we're done asking general questions of Carol, to go back to I have a few remarks to make about the budget, but I will conclude with a proposal that I'd like to put forward. And I'll open the remarks talking about the budget assumptions that Carol provided us at the last meeting when she laid out the final budget assumptions for this coming year. In those assumptions, she talked about the various revenue shortfalls that are expected this budget year resulting from the pandemic, things out of our control. Those budget shortfalls include reduced food and reimbursements, reduced corporate personnel property replacement taxes, reduced facility sales tax revenues, and reduced registration fees. And we had hoped for an increase from the state's new evidence-based funding formula this year, which will not occur because of the pandemic. Given the economic impact of the pandemic, there's every reason to believe that these revenue shortfalls will continue and likely worsen. We know, for example, the impact of our district's decreased enrollment this year will be felt in a lower state allocation next year. In addition to these revenue shortfalls, the pandemic has presented new academic, physical, and mental health challenges. I have faith that our district can meet these challenges, but they come with costs that we didn't anticipate. So I see my responsibility as a board member to ensure that this budget that we'll vote on tonight reflects today's current reality. The spending budget Carol provided us includes decreases in personnel and other expenditures that aren't needed because our students are not in the buildings. The cost of 2 SROs at $327,000, who were hired to address safety concerns in our middle and high schools, should also be lowered to reflect the fact that our students are not in our buildings. Reducing the budget for SROs is applying the same logic used to reduce our food service contract by 25% because we're serving fewer meals, and the logic we used to reduce the budget line for our substitute teachers this year. I question why the same logic wasn't applied to paying for 2 SROs when students are not in our buildings. I hope we'll return to the hybrid approach we intended to start the year with, but given the input we received from some families at the start of the summer, indicating their reluctance to return to a school setting until a vaccine is available, it is highly unlikely we will have all our students back in our schools this year. Our district needs to be laser focused on the challenges resulting from this pandemic, helping students and families and staff with remote learning, as well as supporting their physical and mental health needs. And our budget needs to reflect this laser focus by paying for personnel who are best equipped to address those needs. So social workers, counselors, and teachers to reduce class sizes, which is the most effective approach to helping our struggling students. While the SROs can assist in these areas and they sound like exemplary individuals, they are not trained counselors, social workers, or teachers. I don't consider amending our SRO contract with the city of Urbana lightly, but that agreement was made before our world changed with the pandemic. I believe it's reasonable for us to offer to pay a portion of the SRO costs this year, recognizing the limited scope of work SROs have already done and can perform in our schools while students are learning remotely. From my discussions with the mayor and various members of the city council, they recognize the unprecedented circumstances all of us are living through, and they're willing to work with the district to amend our SRO agreement this year. And the city council approved a resolution to that effect at last night's meeting, city council meeting. Our focus tonight is on the budget for the coming year, reducing the SRO $327,000 budget line to address our district's critical needs arising from the pandemic, just as we reduced the budget for our food service contract and the budget for our substitute teachers because we don't have students in our buildings, acknowledges this year's reality. Next year's reality will hopefully be different. So I propose amending the 2021 budget to reflect hiring 1, not 2 SROs in the 2021 budget year, reducing that budget line from $327,007 to $163,503.50. And I assume that budget would need a second to be discussed. Budget proposal.
If it's allowed, I will second it. Is this something that we can, is this an amendment that we can make a motion on tonight?
Well, there's a motion on the floor to accept the prior budget, so you would need the maker of the motion and the second to approve that as well, I believe. But I would defer to Ruth Ann's parliamentarian expertise.
You're muted. Unmute, Ruth Ann, and there you go.
Yeah.
Something popped up on my screen and totally blanked me out. Yes, Paul's correct.
So can you just restate what needs to happen?
Well, so your friendly amendment essentially would have to be accepted by the maker of the original motion as well as the second, and then we could move on. Basically, they would be a part of the motion that I made, which hasn't yet been voted up or down by the board.
So it sounds like Paul made the motion, and I don't know who I can't remember who seconded it. Brenda seconded it. Okay, so I guess the call comes to you two.
Yeah. Well, I've been giving this whole issue a lot of thought over the past couple of weeks. I've talked to a lot of people, and I've of course read the emails we've been getting, and my thoughts really came more to akin to what Dr. Weemout spoke out in his public comment earlier, is that this it needs to be done judiciously, and be solicitous of input from students, parents, and staff members, whether that's through a survey or some kind of an outreach. I'm not married one way or another necessarily to SROs specifically, but I want to make sure that it's done with the proper input. What we're voting on tonight is the budget. Whether or not there's a line item for SROs and it doesn't reflect the reality that we have a contract with the city. What I mean by that is we would have to have a formal motion in a future meeting to actually make that change, right? So this vote right here, right now, whether, even if I accepted that friendly amendment, wouldn't change the fact that we would have to vote to enter negotiations with the city at a future meeting, because that wasn't on our agenda tonight. So what I would propose is that we have a discussion on that matter at a future meeting, to have more outreach with our community with regards to getting the parents, students, and staff members' opinions on whether or not SROs should be retained, and as well as if we decide to go that route. I don't want us to once again do something at the top down and have our building administrators have to quickly come up with a plan for it. So what I would want is, if we're moving away from the SROs filling the role, I would want our building administrators to have a plan in place to replace either through new staff members or rejiggering roles, so that there's somebody in the building who's fulfilling the role that the SRO had before. Because they're part of our security plan. I just think that there should be more of a bottom-up approach with regards to planning before we actually move forward with this. That's where I sit. So basically, we wouldn't be done here with this tonight, but I want this to be an ongoing discussion.
So if I'm reading you correctly, Paul, it sounds like then the motion that the amendment that Peggy suggested, since you were the first person to place the motion, you reject the amendment.
That's correct. I mean, it's like saying I'm doing a personal budget and there's a line item here for like my cable bill, and I'm thinking about canceling it, but until I've actually called it Comcast and canceled that it's still part of the budget. It's still an expense until there's a decision made otherwise. But we should, because of the input we're getting from the community, we certainly need to revisit the decision. But tonight's discussion is kind of parallel to it, and not the actual decision.
Okay, so unless I'm misunderstanding, it sounds like Peggy's motion has been rejected, voted down, whatever you want to say.
Oh, the friendly amendment.
Friendly amendment, thank you, has been, I don't want to say the word reject, that's kind of harsh, but I want a better word that we use for that. Okay, well then.
Can I just make one comment before, and I understand, I think I only partially understand what you're saying, Paul. My feeling is, and I would certainly welcome another very broad-based discussion like we had last fall with the community involving all parties on the value of SROs. I don't think that's going to happen in the next couple months or in the next few weeks. I think we need to really build up that momentum, and I'm not sure we as a board have unilaterally said we're ready to move to that. But today we have to vote on a budget. And even if we can't finalize it in tonight's discussion, I guess I would like to hear how people are envisioning the decision about not amending the SRO line in the same way we did our food contract line and our substitute line and our utility cost line, because we don't have students in the building. How, a couple of you addressed this last time, but the rest of you did not. How you justify keeping that line in full when we don't have students in the building and the SROs are not doing the services we contracted them to do. And we're talking about amending it. We're not talking about changing a whole program. That discussion needs to happen, but it sort of feels like this is a way to avoid doing what I think needs to be done now to make this budget whole and to address our critical needs. It feels like you're sort of circumventing it and kicking it down the road. And
that's not my intention. I'm speaking more in a, I guess, procedural manner. I mean, we can try to be Solomon here and cleave it in half, but you know, in terms of like how that contract actually pays for things, you know, a good portion of that is for the vehicles that have already been purchased and the equipment that have already been purchased, as well as the salaries and benefits, right? So we're like a third of the way or fourth of the way through the year already as well, that we've been paying. So you know, if we wanted to reduce from 2 to 1, I'm not sure that the actual cost would be cut in half at this point either, right?
It might not be, but when I heard,
question.
yes, I didn't hear who
Sorry,
said.
somebody talking.
Oh,
I wanted to chime in with a question. So I think if I understood correctly, and this is probably mostly addressed at you, Anne, as board president. If I understood correctly, our attorneys have said that we don't have the option to approve the budget line by line, that we either need to approve the complete budget or no budget. Is that what your understanding is?
I think so. But the nature of last night's discussion made me wonder if that was still a possibility. So I don't know. I saw Jennifer, you were nodding your head.
Yeah, so that is the advice of two of our attorneys, is that, and it kind of goes back to what Paul said last time about kind of cherry picking items out. You know, our budget doesn't function like the state budget, where you can just kind of line out a line and say you're not going to fund that line. Similar to what our conversation we had in the springtime, you either vote yes for the budget or you vote no. And of course, you know, would have the option to explain why you're voting no and share your reasons, but you have to vote in, you have to accept the budget in whole or reject it in whole, basically. That's what Tori's saying.
And then to piggyback on that, so if we were to vote for the budget tonight in whole, because we need a budget, that doesn't stop us from the ability to, at a later time, go to the city and say, we need you to absorb some of this cost or anything else, or we want to get rid of SROs. Approving the budget doesn't prevent us from having that ability to do that, correct?
Correct.
Okay, that answers my questions.
Yeah, and we've already started those conversations about, and again, we can't really put a price on that yet because we don't know how long we're going to be remote. So those conversations would be better had when we know exactly if we're going to be remote for a month, for 2 months, for 3 months. And we can talk to the city about how we could, you know, how they could help make us whole for this time that we've been remote.
Although it would send a very strong message if this board voted for the budget with 2 full-time SROs, ignoring the idea that we don't have students in the building and they're not doing the services they contracted for. What I heard from the city council meeting, and I don't usually attend all their full meetings, but I did last night because I really wanted to hear the full discussion around the resolution. What I heard was that they will work with us however we wish them to do so, to carry out our desire about SROs in our building, whether it's amending it by half, whether it's cutting it out altogether while amending it by a third. They will work with us to make it happen.
Or keeping
I think
it.
this board sends the wrong message if we say, well, we'll just vote it as it is, 2 full-time SROs and assume the cuts that we think should happen will happen. I think we need to make our voice clear. Do we think the cuts need to happen or not? And I guess what I'm hearing is some of kind of hiding behind it will happen down the road and it's too complicated for us to do it. I think we send a message in our vote by voting it up or down.
John, you had something to say?
I was just going to say, in past practices, when we've had to reduce the budget, we have had budget reduction meetings, seminars, asked for lists, and we've gone from there. That's the only thing I wanted to add. I spoke last time. I've been accused tonight by many people of hiding behind things. I'm not hiding behind anything. I'm in favor of, we have historically, and this year and every other year, we've historically paid close attention to hiring practices. And when we've had somebody's job at stake, we've been very careful about reducing there. We've done other reductions besides that. I mean, in addition to, in this particular instance tonight, we're not transporting anybody on a bus, and yet we're still paying MTD. We have many other areas where we have not, because students aren't in the building, we're not spending money. And I think the same thing can be negotiated here. But we've also heard tonight that our SROs are doing stuff they're working. They're not twiddling thumbs. They're not being reassigned by the police department to do something elsewhere. I would like to hear an administrative recommendation at some point tonight on this matter as well.
So, yeah, sure, John. I mean, we have an agreement as far as you heard from a couple of our administrators, and from the administrative level, we have an agreement, and until the board directs us that we're no longer going to be in that agreement, we are moving forward with our SROs and incorporating them as part of our student support team. I made a statement last night at the city council meeting to that effect, that we value our SROs, and I've said here multiple times, and I know it was mentioned in the comments, I think we have the opportunity to do something great. And just like we do everything here in Urbana, we listen, we incorporate voices. The young man who came tonight and made comments with Nate Wall, we would want to reach out to those students as well, and make sure that all voices are part of this process. It is very unique for us to have two individuals as in the people that we have, SRO Robinson and SRO Barnett, and their temperaments and their backgrounds and their commitment to Urbana. I just think if we move forward, and it is our intention until you guys tell us otherwise, that we're going to continue to move forward with the plan that we had for training and support and restorative practices, and including them as part of our teams. And especially we'll hit the ground when the students come back.
So do you want it to continue, or do you not want it to continue?
Yes, I want it to continue, and our administrators want it to continue as well at both levels. And again, going back to what Dr. Wemelt said, I think, in a very thoughtful way. But yes, we want it to continue.
Well, I mean, if this board is unwilling to make any changes to this budget, I sure hope we do schedule, as Joe Wemelt suggested, an opportunity to discuss the philosophical underpinnings of using SROs in our district, as many have called for. And I hope we do that sooner than later. I would have been happy to just amend the budget to reflect today's reality, as we did in other lines, and wait to have that broader discussion when more of our people are back in our building. But
I wholeheartedly agree with that, Peggy. I want to have the discussion soon. I'm not trying to kick the can down months down the road.
And I don't disagree that conversation should happen, but I do feel like this was not a line item that we notified a big portion of those individuals who did come before. They just don't even know this is happening. And so it's really not right for us to here make a decision on top of the decision that was already made before without giving those individuals a fair opportunity to come back and to state their side. You know, some people knew about this. Everybody doesn't watch the news.
Yeah.
Everybody doesn't get, some people are against the News Gazette in my community anyway. And so as I started to kind of mention it, there are a lot of people who just don't know that this is even back on the table and have even expressed anger over other people speaking for them. And I heard that from some of the kids that wrote in. Cameron's letter really hit my heart because he basically said, who are you to speak for me without speaking to me first? And he's right. We owe it to these kids, to the administrators, and to those who are in the school every day to give them an opportunity to say whether or not they're in agreement. And you're right, Peggy, things have changed and maybe they're not in agreement anymore. But we owe that to them to make that decision and to hold a full budget while we notice people could really be detrimental to us. I mean, we're talking levies and all sorts of things that go with our budget being approved on time. So I don't personally think it's Paul's intention to just skirt this, you know, and I've had conversations with Paul before. I don't think that's the intention at all. But I think it's a little unfair to those people that spent, and some of them did come back, and I do see some of the same names, but there are quite a few that just don't know. It's unfair for us to have made a commitment, not just to the police department, but to those individuals, to the majority. And you admitted in the last meeting that the majority was in favor of SROs. So we owe it to that majority to say, hey, we are back at the table on this and we want to hear from you again. Now, I had a lot more that I was going to say, but I'm not. I feel like what I just said should be enough for me. I may post some thoughts, but I really think several from these groups that are speaking need to take a step back. And maybe while they're taking a step back, they need to take a step into my neighborhood and actually have some conversations with these kids. You know, we don't see you at our events. That's what these kids are saying. That's what you hear in their letters. How dare you? That's what they're saying. How dare you? It's time that not just the community, the board, I mean, it's time to step up. If you have so much to say about the bad stuff that's happening in our schools, why don't we see you in our schools? That's what Cameron said tonight. President of the African American Club, an active kid, 8 years in the district. We have to do better.
And
And it's not just this SRO topic. We have to do better. The suspensions, the people writing about suspensions, you're right. Suspensions have been a problem since schools were integrated. This is not new. This didn't just happen in Urbana School District. It's happening all over the nation with Black and brown kids. It's not just an Urbana issue. The school to prison pipeline argument should not be an argument in Urbana School District. I'm sorry to inform you, get your facts. When you look at the data that was presented from the last 5.5 years, you had 33 kids arrested. In the end, only one of those kids actually had charges. How exactly, if we're having an average of 6 kids arrested at school per year for the 5.5 years, are we in Urbana a school to prison pipeline? Somebody explain that to me. If we're going to talk about statistics, if we're going to talk about numbers, let's talk about it all. If we're going to talk about the fact that we need Black teachers, how about you help us get some Black teachers in our district? Because our people are out at job fairs and they struggle to attract Black people to this town. They struggle. It's not that they're not there. It's not that this district doesn't want to see Black faces. We all want to see some Black teachers for our Black children. We all want to see Hispanic teachers for our Hispanic children. If you knew how hard it was for this district to get bilingual people, then you'd understand why we had to hire an intern. We took what we could get. We had to hire an intern just to be able to speak to our Spanish students at the high school. But does that mean we're not trying? No. So all the energy you guys are putting into talking about the shortcomings in this district, put that energy into helping this district. That's Urbana's problem. Urbana's problem is we sit back in our cozy, our privileged households. We talk about what the Black children need without even talking to the Black children. And then we come and bash our brand new administration who has not even had enough time to start to turn around morale, let alone work on suspension data, let alone work on helping student achievement. She hasn't even had a chance. She just got here and she had 1,000 fires to put out when she got here. But your complaints in your privileged little houses is what she's not doing when she's working 12 and 16-hour days, 7 days a week, trying to make things happen. She has a Black kid who just graduated. How can you sit and act like she doesn't care about Black children? We are the Black lives you talk about every day. Those signs that you're holding up, that's my family. That's the kids that I'm getting up in the morning and getting to school, that I'm feeding, that I'm keeping off of the streets. Don't ever tell me as a board member that I don't care about Black and brown kids. Because that's my kid. I was that kid. I got bused from an all-Black neighborhood to Lille Elementary School where I was met by a racist teacher. Don't you ever tell me I don't understand what it's like. I was one of a handful of kids in a school that only wanted me there for statistics. Now, I've went off in a tangent. I understand that. But until you people step your foot into our schools, including board members, I'm calling you out, board members, you have no clue what these children are going through. And then to sit and listen to some of them actually say, this officer helped me. What do you mean he's not good? We have Black administrator. We have Black people. Jay Simpson just wrote about it. He's in the school. He's a basketball coach. He's in the hallways. Jerry Moreland, Mr. Morrow, the lead clinician from the middle school came and said, these people help me do my job better. How do we ignore that? I'm ignoring that for a person who doesn't even have a kid at the middle school or the high school and has probably not ever set foot into the school. I'm going to ignore the lead clinician. How dare me if I do? And to not let them come back to the table to try to sneak this in as a part of a pandemic when it's really a bigger agenda is wrong. It's wrong. And you shouldn't sleep good at night knowing that you're wrong for doing this and you're wrong for sneaking in and not making sure that everybody is at the table. I'm done.
Thank you, Tori. Thank you.
Yeah, I appreciate your input a great deal, Tori. I need to say, however, I think we need to be very careful that we don't paint all those who spoke against the SROs in our school with the same brush. We had people who were community members, people who were organization members, people who were students, who were parents, who were teachers. So I just think we need to be careful not to say they are all operating under the same mission, because that's just not true.
And I'm not meaning that every single person. It's not everybody, but there are a large group. There are people in that group that probably are afraid to walk down my block, who have never sat and had conversations with kids, but who just have their opinion based on some study they saw in another school or based on a small group of people that they talk to. I had Cameron from the African American Club. I emailed him back. You know what he told me? Somebody spoke for me at a meeting and they misspoke. They didn't ask me about SROs. That's what made him write us. Somebody spoke and basically put words in his mouth that the African American Club president was not in support of SROs. I want the people who are out here putting all the energy behind this to be a part of some solutions. And the solution isn't just get rid of SROs. What are we teaching our kids? To hate police officers? I mean, just like Amari said in her letter. So what? You're not here to educate me that there are some good officers here and that we can work with them and that they can be helpful to us? We want solution-driven people. Come and walk in our school building.
I agree. I think we've only heard from a small amount of people because a lot of people, we voted on this in December. This is now September. I mean, these SROs are, they're working every day. They're working hard at their jobs, whether we have students or not. They're on teams trying to make our schools better. And I think that people accepted the fact that we did hire 2 SROs for a reason. The need was there. And for this to be brought back up again, it kind of surprises me, to be honest with you. I understand about the climate now, but this was already a vote that we had taken in December. And I don't understand why we have to revisit it.
Well, I feel that the need to revisit it is directly impacted because of COVID. I mean, we would be naive to say that we can't revisit any issue. I'm not advocating for every issue that we've already discussed and voted on, but everything has changed since December for our district. And I'm trying to stick to tonight's discussion of the budget. And I agree with Peggy. I think there are so many ways we can spend our money. I don't believe that it's possible for an SRO to fully do the job that they're contracted to do with no students in the building. And I do believe that we have support people. If we want to talk about numbers and we want to talk about doing things from a top-down manner or doing things quickly or slapdashedly, we barely have had time to assess how the support staff we spent over $1 million on just over a year ago, how they've been doing their jobs. I don't advocate in a time of COVID to add more money for more personnel when we haven't figured out how well we're doing with the systems we've already put in place. I've always argued for being deliberate and careful and methodical about everything we agree to do, and that includes researching our own practices and giving ourselves checking over our work, and then that includes the SROs. And I honestly, everything you said, Tori, I appreciate it and I respect it. And I have no right to speak for a lot of kids in this district who don't come from the same background as me. I do have the responsibility to try to think of everybody's viewpoint in terms of the budget and the policies that we try to practice and pass in this district. And for me, it is fiscally irresponsible right now to think about this money when there are no children in the buildings. And that might change. And I see that what the city council has done for us last night was gave us a gift. And that gift was an open door. It was an open door for us to be able to continue a conversation that we didn't expect we'd be having today. Nobody predicted this. But to say that we can't ever discuss it, what kind of a world would we live in if we just rigidly followed the rules that we set from however far back? When things change, we can't change them. We have to change with the times. So I'm advocating for us taking this gift of an open door from the city to further explore how we could be financially impacted by having SROs in our buildings with no children, what we could potentially work out with them in the coming months, even if it's not for this budget, whatever, and next year's budget, fine. I am not going to dictate how somebody should feel about them right now or anything else. I just think that right now it is illogical. And it is also worth taking our time over and being very careful now that our circumstances have changed, and also being careful about how our support staff who are already USD employees and working under contract with us are doing their jobs in this time. And if they are so overwhelmed with the work that they're doing and they really truly do need those SRO officers there, then great, let's have that conversation. But I'm not trying to approach this from a personal standpoint. I'm trying to talk about this in terms of the budget tonight and how this might affect us. Our economy in the state, in the country, is not going to get better for a very long time. I predict it's going to get worse. And I want to be cognizant of that with every financial step we take in the next year. That's my say.
Then we should have a discussion about budget reductions and all budget reductions, and we shouldn't just pick this out. This was a planned expenditure. I don't view this as an increased expenditure. This was a planned expenditure. We had other planned expenditures that are in this budget that represent increases. You can start with wage increases for every employee that we voted on unanimously. We didn't have any issues with it. But that was a much greater addition to our budget than what this is. This was a planned expenditure. And so I have to agree with Tori. If we want to have a discussion about the philosophy of SROs, let's have a discussion about the philosophy of SROs. Let's not hide behind the budget.
Well, John, I'm not hiding behind anything. I'm trying to stay within the confines of tonight's agenda. I fully mean to ask for a discussion in the future. Now that we've got this open door from the city, I'm planning on having a discussion in the future and putting it on the agenda because I think it deserves it. I think everybody deserves it because we don't know what this next year is going to bring for us. We have to be realistic.
Then I'm
Great.
suggesting,
Let's talk about it.
if we're going to talk about budget in this manner, which I don't feel is necessary, our budget is balanced. School districts in this time and age, we can thank our lucky stars that we are primarily property tax based because property tax is not one of those issues where revenue is going down. Champaign is having more difficulty than Urbana because Champaign is more dependent upon sales tax than Urbana is. And Urbana did some advanced planning. But we're not sales tax dependent. Yes, we have a reduction in our sales tax. We have a comprehensive, our sales tax usage though is limited to only capital improvements. So you can bet your bottom dollar we're going to have a discussion about how we're going to finance our future capital improvements because of the reduction in sales tax dollars. That is a legitimate discussion to have. And if we need to have a budget discussion, if we have, Carol has done everything but tell us that our budget is balanced. By the time we take a look at her very conservative revenue estimates, very conservative, and we take a look at how she also is not conservative on expenditures, but always over budgets by a 1 or 2%. And a 1 or 2% on a $70 million budget is a lot of money. And so we're balanced. So this is a false narrative when we sit here and talk about the fact that we are not in a balanced budget situation.
It is a true fact, John, that we have a number of revenue shortfalls that Carol outlined that we know will only worsen over time. And even if we didn't have revenue shortfalls, it wouldn't, I mean, that doesn't excuse spending money that we shouldn't be spending. To me, I see this SRO looking at it no differently than we looked at our substitute line or our food service line. Looked at it, we're not serving meals, we're not serving kids aren't in the building. Let's look at those areas where we shouldn't be paying high personnel expenses. This is no different from those two lines.
It's a little different in the fact the substitutes are temporary workers and food service workers are also part-time contract workers. So it's a little different than full-time hires. Just as a point.
When I said about revisiting, I would be open to being more transparent and everything, but I think a lot of the community did not really come out in droves in support of this because they thought it was already done. In my opinion, I'm ready to make a motion to vote on Carol's budget right now and put it on the floor.
Well, it's already on the floor. We're just debating.
I'll second it.
You did.
You already did.
I already did. Okay.
Well, it's been a few minutes.
Yeah.
No, I'm I think we're kind of in violent agreement here in that, the coronavirus and the events of the summer have brought the philosophy of this and the expense of this into question again and needs to be revisited. But I just think that the budget discussion isn't place for it. I think we need to have it real soon, maybe with survey data from parents and teachers and staff members to inform our decision, and our help of our building administrators to understand what a post SRO building would look like to help guide our decision. But I don't think that's part of what we're looking at tonight. I'm sorry.
I agree. I don't think it's for tonight. I think we need to kind of stick to our agenda.
Okay, further comments, further discussion at all on the budget tonight? Okay, I think we have a motion and a second. I guess we are now, and Peggy, did you have anything else you wanted to say since you were in disagreement?
Yeah, no, I'm done. Thank you.
Okay, so we need a roll call, please, Ruth Ann.
Member Carter,
Yes.
Member Demmett,
Yes.
Member Patton,
No.
Member Pulaski,
Yes.
Member Fisher votes yes, Vice President Exum,
Yes.
and President Hall.
No. Motion passes. Okay. We do not have a call for future special or executive meetings in 13.0. So we'll move on to our superintendent's report.
Mute. Sorry about that. I will keep this short. I kept it short on purpose, thinking we would be here late tonight, and we are. So I am going to share my screen if I can ever get there. I have a couple of highlights, and hopefully everybody has seen our students who've been highlighted recently. Are you guys seeing that We Are Better Together?
Yes.
Okay, thank you. If I can get it now to move to the next slide. Okay, so it is Hispanic Heritage Month starting today. There were activities shared across our buildings. So hopefully you're connected to one of our buildings and you saw some of those activities. Throughout the next month, from September 15th through October 15th, we will be highlighting some of our Hispanic achievements in our community, as well as in our schools and from some of our staff members, and we'll be reading stories. So I recorded a video myself, and we have other people in our Urbana family school district community who are going to be sharing as well. Family Tech Nights are still happening. So last week we held Tech Nights at Leo, King, and Dr. Williams. Tonight we were at Thomas Paine. And the next 2 nights we will be at Yankee Ridge and Wiley. So this is an opportunity for our families, mostly parents, to come out and get some one-on-one help. I popped in on a couple of those events last week, and I know the parents who are coming to those are getting one-on-one support and are really grateful for the opportunity. So hopefully everyone saw the article about Banan in Sunday's paper. And she is, as you read, is doing some amazing work getting her fellow students and not just here in Urbana, but all over the country adjusted to remote learning through her work with FEMA. So we've highlighted Banan before. She's an amazing young lady. She's a senior this year, and we're just really proud of her. So I just wanted to highlight her as well. And Jose. Jose is the new, representing Urbana as the new high school confidential reporter for the year. So that was announced this week, Jose Alvarez. So he will be sharing throughout the year and reporting on his experiences at Urbana High School while he's remote, and hopefully while we return to learning sooner rather than later. And that is it for me.
Oh, Jennifer, I want to take just a moment how far out are you looking at things for us possibly starting school in the buildings?
So that is going to be the topic of our conversation at the next study session. We've already started surveying our administrators. I'm going to be pulling the remote learning planning committee back together, and we're working on a survey for families, staff, and students. You guys have hopefully been following the positivity rates. I know we've been following really closely the activity at the U of I. There are a lot of districts around us that are having school and doing it successfully through a hybrid model. So it is time for us to re-engage our stakeholders. We heard from a very passionate parent tonight. What was her name? Ashley. And we're hearing from many families who are feeling the same way as Ashley and dealing with the same, having the same experiences, not just from young kindergartners. We have kids struggling at all levels, middle school and high school. So we need to get back to having a conversation about what back to school and in-person learning will look like. But before we do that, we do need to hear from lots of voices. That would include our staff, our families, and our students.
Very good, thank you.
Thanks, Jennifer. Do we have any board reports for this evening?
I just want to chime in for just a second and let anyone know I've had a faulty answering machine at my house. I know some of you have been getting some phone calls. I have not. Something's wrong. Sometimes it's nothing but dead air. Sometimes the whole thing is full with just gobbledygook, so on and so forth. If I've missed people who have called, please just email. I might not be able to, know that you called or anything like that, but if you've happen to have tried a time or two and I'm still not calling you back, I would have by now if I had known. So blame it on the house technology, I guess, and I can be reached on email much easier as well. Thank you.
I just wanted to state that ISB, instead of having the in-person dinner meetings, the next upcoming meeting is September 24th. And I am attending that, and hopefully some of my other board members are too. And I can come back and let you know what I find out.
Yep, I'll be sitting in on that.
I'll be there too.
Yes, because you're one of our representatives, Tori.
I'm going to join too, Brenda, and it made me think because we got that email today from the ISB people about the Delegates Assembly Forum or something that's going to be happening later in this month. Do you know much more about that, how that's going to work since we're not having a conference in person?
No, I haven't really heard. I think they're probably still trying to work out all the kinks to that.
Yeah. Oh, well, it'll still be an interest. It sounds like I can't even remember the topic because we've gotten so many invites to different things, but ESB's been setting up lots of virtual learning for us to do, even though we're not doing things in person. So I'm glad we're able to do that, at least remotely.
Yes.
Okay, if there are no other more board reports, I would like to ask for a motion. Well, we need to not adjourn, we need to go into recess because of tonight's executive session. So do I have a motion to go into a 5-minute recess?
So moved.
And
Don't we need to read the full motion for the?
Oh, yes, we do. Thank you.
We don't need a motion to recess. We need a motion to go into exec session.
That first, thank you, John. Okay, so I need a motion for us to go into executive session for the purpose of the appointment, employment, compensation, discipline, performance, or dismissal of specific employees of the district or legal counsel for the district, including hearing testimony on a complaint lodged against an employee or against legal counsel for the district to determine its validity, and litigation when an action against, affecting, or on behalf of the particular district has been filed and is pending before a court or administrative tribunal, or when the district finds that an action is probable or imminent, in which case the basis for the finding shall be recorded and entered into the closed meeting minutes.
Do I have a motion to go to exec session?
So moved.
Or second.
Okay, we got a motion from Paul and second from Ruth Ann. Roll call, please.
Member Carter,
Yes.
Member Dimmitt,
Yes.
Member Patton,
Yes.
Member Pulaski,
Yes.
Member Fisher votes yes, Vice President Exum,
Yes.
and President Hall.
Yes, and we're in, I'd like to go into a 5-minute recess before we reconvene to give everybody a chance to stretch. So do I need a motion?
11:05 p.m.
Okay.
Sorry, I'm just saying it. 11:05 p.m.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you, Austin and Jason. Bye, everybody. Have a good night. The rest of you guys. Bye, Carol. You need us to walk you out since you're muted.
Thanks so much, Carol.